Representative Campbell,
Here.
Representative Knapp,
Here.
Representative Larson,
Here.
Representative Lawley. Here. Representative Riggins.
Here.
Representative Schmidt,
Here.
Representative Tarver,
Excused.
Representative Weber,
Present.
Co-Chairman Heiner,
Here.
Chairman Anderson.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we start, I need to tell you, we have a list of rules just to keep the decorum in the room. I won't go through those rules, but if you violate them, we'll bring them to your attention and do something with it. So everybody please sign in so we have a list of who's joining us today, and welcome to the minerals meeting. First order of business is our able attorney is going to fill you in, and he's going to go completely through everything he presented to us. Right, Brian?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. So Mr. Chairman, just briefly, there are two materials that LSO provided to the committee in advance of this meeting. First, what I would call just a statutory and historical overview of the Wyoming Business Council. This is 2-01 in your online meeting materials. So just a few notes for the committee's consideration and a couple items to highlight. The approved interim topic for the committee is to study the Business Council structure, operations, and programs. The topic as approved by Management Council is in coordination with the Joint Appropriations Committee, who will be focusing primarily on the funding and dollar aspects of the Business Council. But it is anticipated that this committee and Joint Appropriations would work together on this topic, even to the point where, as currently planned, one day of this committee's final meeting in August would be held jointly with the Joint Appropriations Committee. Mr. Chairman, a brief overview of the Business Council. It was created in 1998. It was created largely by consolidating a number of predecessor boards, committees, and divisions. The Business Council is a body corporate. It operates as a state instrumentality. It can sue and be sued. It can make and execute contracts. And in the Economic Development Act, the body of statutes in which the Business Council was created and operates from, specifies a number of other powers and duties of that council. The council is currently governed by a board of directors. There are currently 13 voting members. The governor appoints those members and the Senate confirms them. And at least 12 of the voting members must be Wyoming residents. Among other powers and duties of the Business Council is rulemaking authority. And while the Business Council is exempt from a number of the provisions associated with rulemaking, the Business Council still must submit its rules to LSO for review. Just like any other administrative rule, LSO would review that rule to ensure that, or to recommend if it's within the scope of statutory authority and legislative intent. And then just like any other rule, that goes to the governor, who would then approve the rules that are promulgated. The Business Council has the authority to make and execute contracts. They can acquire, own, lease, and sell property. They are to provide technical and advisory assistance. And then, Mr. Chairman, among other powers and duties and purposes are to prepare and carry out effective economic development and diversification, marketing, and promotional programs. They are to make business and basic business information available to prospective businesses. They are to formulate, promulgate, and advance programs in Wyoming for encouraging the location of new businesses in Wyoming and to retain and grow existing businesses. They are to encourage and solicit private sector involvement, support, and funding for economic development in Wyoming. They are to establish necessary offices in and out of Wyoming necessary to expand and develop industries and trade, and encourage the export of Wyoming products and services to national and international markets. They're also to advise the University of Wyoming and community colleges in designating programs that are beneficial to economic development, and they are required to adopt a statewide broadband enhancement plan. In the first year of each new gubernatorial administration, the Business Council is required to develop a comprehensive economic development strategy. And then as part of their annual report, the Business Council must submit that report, which must include at a minimum all of the following: the status of the implementation of that comprehensive economic development strategy and recommended legislative and executive actions related to the implementation of that strategy, a summary of total investments under the Partnership Challenge Loan Program, progress concerning the development of a research marketing center, and then a summary of the total investments under the Workforce Housing Infrastructure Program. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the memo also outlines some relevant constitutional provisions that may be applicable to the Business Council's function and their work. Among those are Article 16, Section 6, which generally prohibits donations to or in aid of any individual, association, or corporation, except for the necessary support of the poor. Mr. Chairman, one exception to that constitutional prohibition is enshrined in Article 16, Section 12 of the Wyoming Constitution, which establishes an economic development loan fund. And upon a 2/3 vote of the legislature, funds can be appropriated for a revolving investment fund that can be used to promote and aid the economic development of the state. That constitutional provision specifies that fully funded loan guarantees or loans can be provided, and the cumulative total of loans and loan guarantees under this economic development loan fund cannot exceed 1% of the total assessed value of taxable property in the state. Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, I will not go through, the memo goes through each statutory program that the Business Council is tasked with. And I will not go through those programs, but I would be happy to answer questions on those programs should there be any. Mr. Chairman, I'll then go on just to briefly discuss some of the recent work that the legislature has done, as well as this committee has done concerning the Business Council. In 2021, there was legislation that reduced the Business Council board from 15 voting members to 13 voting members. In addition, both in 2020 and 2021, legislation was enacted that tasked the Business Council with administering COVID-19 relief funds, as well as dispersing grant funds that were made available from the CARES Act. There's also legislation that tasked the Business Council with dispersing funds that were made available for broadband projects. During the 2021 interim, this committee had the Business Council as its #1 priority topic for consideration. That topic tasked this committee with comprehensively reviewing the Business Council and its purposes, programs, functions, and operations. Minerals, this committee sponsored one bill related to the Partnership Challenge Loan Program. And among other things in that bill that the legislature did enact during the 2022 session was to eliminate guarantee loan participations and loan guarantees, options for contract financing where an entity or person could pledge the proceeds of a valid contract as collateral for a loan for cash flow purposes was made available. And then it amended a bridge financing program into a different program called the 50/50 financing program. That bill also amended the maximum financing and loan amounts that were available under that Partnership Challenge Loan Program. There were two other bills that were enacted during 2022 that concerned the Business Council. First, the Joint Appropriations Committee sponsored a bill that transferred the Wyoming Council for Women's Issues from the Business Council to the Department of Workforce Services. Second, a bill sponsored by the Select Committee on Tribal Relations clarified that the Eastern Shoshone Tribe, the Northern Arapaho Tribe, and the Cooperative Tribal Governing Body may participate in economic development programs. Then, Mr. Chairman, this past session, the 2026 budget session, there were several legislative efforts surrounding around the Business Council. First, 2026 Senate File 65, which the Joint Appropriations Committee sponsored, was a bill to repeal the Wyoming Business Council and many of its functions, with some functions being transferred to the Wyoming Energy Authority, the State Budget Department, and the Office of State Lands and Investments. And that bill, as well as the others that I'll briefly mention, were not enacted. Next, 2026 House Bill 150 and Senate File 100 would have created a task force to evaluate the Business Council and appoint 2 legislators as ex officio members of the Business Council Board. 2026 Senate File 125 would have directed the Business Council to hold its operations and programs in abeyance beginning on April 15th, 2027. And that bill also would have created a task force to evaluate the Business Council and its programs. Then finally, 2026 Senate File 1, the General Appropriations or Budget Bill, appropriated funds to the Business Council for the first fiscal year of the upcoming fiscal biennium. There was language that would have specified that those funds appropriated to the Business Council could only be used in the upcoming fiscal year. That language was subject to a line item veto, which the legislature did not override. Also in the budget bill was a section 317, that would have deappropriated funds from the Business Ready Community account and had the balance of that account revert to the general fund. That language too was also subject to a line item veto, which the legislature did not override. And then finally in the budget bill, $100,000 was appropriated to the Wyoming Department of Audit to conduct an audit of the Business Council. It was the intent of the legislature that that audit be ideally completed by July 1st, 2026. And the department is required to inform the legislature if it does not foresee completing that audit by that date. That section of the budget bill also listed the items that the audit must include in its review of the Business Council. The next item that's part of your meeting materials, Mr. Chairman, is 2-02. This is a memorandum that my colleagues from the Budget Fiscal Division prepared that goes through and also gives a little bit of different history on the Business Council. And then also, Mr. Chairman, a table of historical appropriations to the Business Council from its inception to the current fiscal biennium. That is a table on page 3. And then also goes through a list of the programs and an inventory of the accounts and their balances that are associated with each of those programs. With that, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my remarks. I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee has.
Questions? Yes. Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thank you, Brian, for the always thorough work that you do. I appreciate it. In all that you looked at, did you find a definition of the term economic development in any of the documents that you looked at? And if so, could you kind of tell us what that definition might be?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, I don't recall seeing one, but I'll do a quick little statutory search and double check.
Follow up?
No, thank you, Mr.
Nope.
Chairman.
Other questions? Other questions? I have a question. I was surprised to see on page 16, the Wyoming Tourism Board. I didn't realize they were connected with the Business Council.
Yep. So Mr. Chairman, I would describe that connection as quite tangential. So when the Economic Development Act was enacted, a majority of those statutes were included in the Business Council statutes. The Office of Tourism and their separate board operate separately from that, but there is a requirement that a member attend the board meetings. But that's really the only connection now with the Office of Tourism.
A member of the Tourism Board attends the Business Council meetings. Is that what you're saying?
Yep. So Mr. Chairman, the board shall assign a member to attend all of the meetings of the Business Council.
Okay. Other questions? Other questions? Other questions? Anything else? You sure you don't want to go through the rest of this?
If you would like me to, Mr. Chairman, be happy to.
No, I think we'll be all right. if we don't have any more questions on it. Does anybody have any questions on the next 100 pages or so? No? Well, we're moving right along then. All right. So we'll turn it over to the Wyoming Business Council for their input. I think they have a handout they want to use, or are we using the one that we already had?
Mr. Co-Chair, members of the committee, we have a number of handouts as well as a brief kind of what I'll call an appetizer to kind of set the stage for the questions and the listening that we'll do today. But perhaps before we get going, would it be okay if I introduced the gentleman who's sitting to my left and some members from the audience that will be here today to help?
That'd be good, Josh. Why don't you introduce some people?
All right. All right. Well, Mr. Co-Chair, to my left is Mr. Derek Smith, and he is the co-chair of our board, and he'll be presenting some commentary at the beginning. I also have other board members as well as members of my team who are here to answer specific questions. I think as we go through the information that was provided prior, as well as some of the information from our introduction today, as questions arise, I might ask your grace in allowing people from my team to come up and answer those if we have specific questions, to just make the most of this time today.
You think we can stump you, huh, Josh?
Mr. Co-Chair, there is no doubt.
Well, we'll try to stump you.
How many from the team do we have? We have all the members?
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, good.
Wow.
Yeah. So Mr. Co-Chair and Mr. Co-Chair, I wanted to bring in the leaders of the different divisions that we have at the Business Council, so that if you did have specific questions, we could do that. We also see this as a really good opportunity to learn about the questions that you have and the ideas that you have, and so I wanted to make sure that they were here to hear that.
Good, good.
It's always
ahead.
good to have people in the dugout.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Representative Heiner, 100%. You're only as good as your dugout, right?
Yeah.
Well, good morning, Chairman, Senators, Representatives. As Mr. Durrell stated, I'm Derek Smith, currently serving as co-chair of the Wyoming Business Council. For my day job, I actually work with Devon Energy as a landman, so I'm in the energy sector. Thank you all for the opportunity to come and share with you all today about the Business Council. I think first and foremost, I want to acknowledge the challenges that came out of last session and why we are sitting in this room as a business council. We understand how the agency got here and are taking it very seriously, realizing that there was a desire to see change, a desire to understand what the Business Council does, and look forward to working with all of you and others on how to move forward with that in a clear, transparent, and evolving way. As we all know, the business environment in our state is continually changing, and that's something we have to adapt to. I think today is a great example of that no organization works alone. The Business Council is committed, and the board is committed to be a collaborative partner to everyone who's investing in Wyoming's future, all the way from individual entrepreneurs and small businesses to large corporations. We've got great examples of those even just here in Casper. Kickstart partners all the way through Austin Engineering that I was talking with one of you about this morning. And also from our smallest rural communities to our largest statewide economic development organizations. First and foremost, we're here to listen. I think that's a message that we've heard loud and clear, is that there needs to be a lot of listening done by the Business Council to understand how we as an organization can better serve the state. We also commit to reporting back to you on our work underway and asking for your input and the input of all of our stakeholders as we chart that path forward. Again, this isn't something that we can do in a vacuum. This isn't something that we should do in a vacuum. Instead, this is something we should all do together. Wanted also to acknowledge that the Business Council hasn't been sitting still since session ended. and just waiting for this committee to come together and start. So here's just kind of a few list of the things that we've been working on already. First of all is an internal review. So the Business Council, with the help of a lot of these staff members who are here today, have started on an internal review of our operations, programs, and organizational structure to identify where improvements can be made. This was a great opportunity and a great, in essence, I wouldn't say wake-up call, but a great time to take stock, retool some systems, and redouble those efforts. So really kicking off down that path. There are lots of ideas, lots of thought, and a lot of people who want to be in the conversation. So although it is a little tricky to balance that many voices sometimes, our job is really to say, welcome to the conversation. Here's what we've been doing. Here's where we think we're going. Now help us. What are we doing right? Where can we learn? Where can we grow? So I think what you can hear from what I'm saying, hopefully, and going on, is we don't have all the answers, far from it, but we want to work together towards them. With that in mind, also have been reaching out statewide and meeting with key partners to begin rebuilding, strengthening those relationships. That was one thing also that we heard a lot of, was about strength of relationships. A state like Wyoming is not that big, right? So really building relationships, having strong relationships is key. One of the more recent things the board has taken on, and we formalized this in our special meeting last week, were around CEO goals. So specifically tasking the Business Council CEO with 7 key areas of focus around building trust and statewide alignment, defining Wyoming's economic development philosophy, establishing clear measures of success, launching a regional economic planning framework, developing a statewide economic development strategy, recommending improvements to laws and programs, and lastly, aligning a budget and funding strategy. So we sent that as a press release on Friday. We can go through those a little further in depth if you'd like, but really thought it was important to show everybody the direction that the board is wanting to see that agency go and what we are holding the CEO accountable for going forward. I think it's also important to note, at least in my study of the history, this isn't really something that's ever been done publicly until this point. And I think that again shows our commitment to being open and transparent with the public. Additionally, in that meeting, we launched a formal review of the Business Council's board structure. Because how can we look at the interior of the organization if we don't look at the board itself? The purpose of this review is really to identify what changes in our makeup, size, and responsibilities would allow the organization to operate more effectively. We've got a group of 4 of our board members, which is being chaired by Mr. Lance, that are taking this on, and a full report with the changes to the internal policy, as well as any potential legislative or executive changes that would need to happen to execute on that. We're planning to have delivered back to us by June 30th. So hopefully that'd be something we have in hand, can work through, and would be able to bring to the next committee meeting, as anything that comes from that. So where are we headed? I think that's kind of the important next step. That's what we've done. Where are we going? First step of that, where are we going, is sitting right here with you guys. In addition to that, we've been working very tightly with the governor's office, myself in particular, to get a stakeholder advisory group going. So the idea behind that is to have a group of our internal Business Council board members, and there will be 4 of us, myself, Ms. Worthen, Mr. Pivick out of Rock Springs, and Mr. Kinski out of Sheridan. We'll have that internal group, and then we'll have a group of external partners from around the state. So the folks we're trying to really reach in that group are the actual business owners, the actual economic developers, and community leaders, and really use them as a group to go, here are the ideas, this is what we want to propose. Now help us work through this. Help us troubleshoot this, help us to know what's actually going to help you, what would be a hindrance. That group is tasked with conducting a self-evaluation of analysis of the organization, and then providing specific recommendations for agency improvements, statutory changes, and any appropriate budget requests. So you can tell there's a theme here around internal improvement and statutory changes. Lastly, regional development planning, as was kicked off in our February 26th board meeting. The Business Council is developing a system to measure and track the real world results of its programs. This includes building public facing dashboards so that outcomes are visible and easy to understand. And again, the idea is to get our communities working together and for it to be visible, the work that we're doing with those communities to go forward. So in closing, we heard the message loud and clear. We are excited to work with you, to work with others, and to work with our state on how do we make the Business Council better. We all talk about how we want to keep additional generations here in the state. And how do we do that? By providing them with jobs and the ability to live and thrive in the state of Wyoming. Just wanted to make a couple notes in my closing. I'd like to thank the LSO for their thorough review of statute. That was I think a huge help for all of us to lay that groundwork. That was fantastic in my opinion. Also would like to acknowledge WAM and WIDA and WCCA looking at their presentation that comes later in the day. Believe that they're right and they're spot on in the material that they're providing. Wyoming's future must be built from the bottom up. The job of our agency is to help facilitate those things to happen for the local communities, but the local communities really need to be the ones who take charge. So we're excited to partner with them. And the Business Council has been doing work for 25 years in this state, and the foundational building blocks that have been developed along the way still remain valuable. And we look forward to putting them into practice with all of you. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Durrell, unless you've got any direct questions for me at this time.
Before you go on, I should inform the committee that the co-chairman and I are kind of in agreement that we will hear all we can and question everything we can from the Economic Development Group this meeting. The next meeting, we'll see them again and try to formulate some legislation if we need some legislation. And then the last meeting with the JC, we will have our legislation and they will have whatever legislation they're going to have on the finances, and we'll approve that. So 3 times you're going to hear from Business Council, and every time we're going to question everything, get everything on the table so we all understand everything. And so that's what we're doing with the Business Council in 3 meetings. Thank you. Yes, Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did have a question for Co-Chairman Smith. We heard earlier when we heard the statutory review, that in the first year of the next governor, there will be a plan developed, an extensive review developed. And obviously, no, we haven't, either way, we're going to have a new administration coming in regardless of the outcome of the coming election. But we're talking 8 months away from a new administration. So can you give me any information about your view or thoughts about how that should or should not inform what we're about to do, the task we're taking on here?
For sure. Chairman, Representative Lawley, that's a great point to bring forth, and it's one that we're trying to take into account with the work we're doing right now. My personal view, and I think this is shared by Mr. Durrell and the rest of the staff and the board, we want to take this time frame in the middle to really go, how can we rework our own problems, our own challenges, and take that as that time internally to try to address those issues. And then when we have some clarity as to what that upcoming administration looks like, then being able to use that and work with them in terms of what their overall vision is. So basically work on getting the car running right, so that way when the new governor comes along, then we can head down the highway.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that. I just have one follow-up. In your view, what sort of things could a new governor do in that beginning of his administration that would affect some of the tune-up you're trying to do, getting, as you put it, your things, your house in order, so to speak? I don't mean to misquote you, but what could they do? What kind of things in your view could they do? I'm really honestly trying to understand the space and understand how all this works together as we try to do our job as the legislature. So thank you.
For sure. Chairman, Representative Lally, my personal belief is guidance in terms of which direction they want to go, like, and to support across agencies. So if we as a state decide that housing is a major issue, then to have some direction and to direct different agencies to work together hand in hand towards solving those problems. Mr. Durrell, I would defer to you if there's anything additional you think it should be added to that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Lally, I think you're asking a really astute question, because we don't want to necessarily get the cart behind ahead of the horse, but what we do want to do is make sure that we have for example, a cleaner statute. We have a 94-page statute today, and a lot of that stuff probably doesn't need to be in there. And so that's an area that the legislature can definitely help. I also think it's important for us to be able to work with the legislature to understand what's going on the ground, so that we can present that to the new chief executive and be able to work closely together. I think building that relationship is a key component. What I would say is the current work we have around a strategy and the current work we have around understanding the growth problem of Wyoming should all be utilized for the new chief executive to work with the legislature. Cleaning up the statute and also making some fundamental changes to the statute will enable us to work faster with the new chief executive. And that's exactly the type of thing that I hope to be able to present with your input and your guidance from this first meeting to the second meeting.
No follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
No
Thank you.
follow-up?
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Representative Heiner.
Oh, there it works. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Co-Chair Smith, I'm going to follow up with the question that Representative Lawley had. So reading the statute, you are required to update your trajectory and your path every time there's a change in administration by the chief executive officer. That could be 8 years between the change in administration. In fact, this is 8 years. So is that a timely event to wait 8 years to update that path, that strategy, or should it be more often than every time that the chief executive is changed?
Wonderful question, Chairman Heiner. I can at least start with part of it, and then I'll hand it off to Josh. Even if there is an 8-year term, it's still reviewed every 4 years with the governor's office. So even whenever that term ends, it triggers another review. To your point of, is that timely enough? I think this is something that needs to be ever evolving. And that's based upon the feedback that we receive.
Yeah, and Mr. Co-Chair, thanks for the question. What, Mr. Co-Chair? Thanks for that. I do think that it's important to have those formalized, but I also think it's important to continue to evolve in between those times. And so if you kind of look back, we've already done 2+ during this time, during this administration. So the frequency of which is really more about the problem that we see rather than a some sort of arbitrary timeline of 4 to 8 years.
No follow-up. Other questions? Other questions? Other questions? This is your opportunity. Josh, go ahead.
Thank you, Co-Chair Anderson. If I might run through just a few slides, I'm just going to pull a few pieces of information from the compendium of Business Council information. And maybe what that will do is just provide a little bit of a framework, or maybe a starting point for more discussion today. I'm happy to go through each element of the information we provided to you. I think there are, maybe over 100 pages of total information. Happy to go through any of it, but I thought maybe just a few slides to warm us up might be helpful. And I provided those to our friends at LSO, and they'll be displaying those on the screen. It's just a sort of a summary of the information that has already been provided. Co-Chair Anderson, is that acceptable to the committee to do that?
I think it is.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, so if we sort of jump in at the high level, maybe I can share just a really quick story. So many of you know that I grew up in Rawlins, Wyoming, and my dad was a coal miner. And growing up, I always wanted to drive a drag line. I don't think you really drive those things, but when I was a kid, that's what I thought. And I loved going out to the coal mines in Hannah, and I loved that right up until about fourth grade when my dad got laid off from the mines, and those mines had their first bit of struggles. And then I realized I probably was going to have to leave the state and probably going to have to pay for college on my own and do all of those things. And so at a young age, I realized the challenge that Wyoming faces, and we still face it. And I think it's really pretty incredible and maybe a little bit almost magical that I could be here in Wyoming through my whole career. I'm no longer in fourth grade. I'm much older than that now. And to be able to work on that exact same problem that fourth graders around the state might be facing, because it turns out that Wyoming has that challenge still, in that we are a fairly boom and bust economy. I think members of this committee understand that better than any people in Wyoming. And we are working on this really, really big challenge that our outmigration, our brain drain, is twice the national average. We export more people from our communities than any other state. And so that's the problem we work on. And we do it in terms of policy and investments. And we say, how do we change that really big challenge of outmigration? And if you think about it, we say the words outmigration, but I want everybody to think about that in a little bit different terms. At my house, outmigration isn't just a term. It has 4 names: Olivia, Grace, Ruby, and Maddox. And I'm guessing that many of us have that same feeling, that those outmigration numbers have names. And so we work on this exact problem because we want to create a Wyoming where the Olivia, Grace, Rubies, and Maddoxes of the world can find opportunity in Wyoming. And so if we jump to the next slide, we're not alone in, like, these are census data pieces, and we know that 2 out of every 3 Wyomingites need to leave. But I want to describe this graph to you really, really quickly. We did a thing called the exit interview, and it was a webinar that talked about how do we help people stay in Wyoming and how do we address this outmigration. And we asked that audience there were quite a few, there were hundreds of people that attended, and 232 people did a survey, and about 100 of them, so half of them, said the biggest challenge, the one thing, the one factor that most influences young people's decision to stay or return to Wyoming is jobs. That is, availability of meaningful jobs in their field. Now, later today and throughout the course of our discussions, you're going to hear about jobs, because jobs are the deal. That's what we're working toward. Now, you don't just go out to make jobs, right? You don't just wave a magic wand and jobs occur. That happens because the underlying policies, the investments that we make, the challenges that our communities face, we address those. And so it's a big deal to Wyomingites. It's a big deal to each of us. And it's something that we focus on a lot. If we jump to the next slide, you can jump to, you're also going to see information about what I think is really critical about the building blocks of economic development. Now, you're going to hear from experts that see it from the ground. They understand what's happening on the ground in our communities. And you're going to hear a lot about infrastructure, because that's a big deal. And we look at all of these elements, and we look at the maybe philosophical infrastructure in each of these elements, whether it be infrastructure development, whether it be quality of life, innovation, entrepreneurship. How do we get existing businesses to grow? And then how do we recruit new businesses to our communities? Those are elements that the Business Council works on. And we don't necessarily come in and say, here's a program, use this program. We go in and say, what program would work? Do we need to change programs? Do we even need a program? Is there a real problem here? And we look at those things to fill in those gaps where they might exist. Wyoming is a very special place. Our economy is quite different than other places, and we need to address those elements. Jump to the next couple slides. So looking at this map of Wyoming, one of the things that we're doing is we're really working at a local level to build capacity. And I think a number of you have been involved in some of these things we call the Assessment to Action program. And what it does is it works at a local level, not just to come in for a day and listen, but it's to come in and understand the problems and then have that community work together over the course of many weeks, over 2 months generally, to work on a problem. In fact, in one of the areas, it's a basin up in the northwest part of the state. We've done a number of these, and they're all actually getting together to work on like a summit, to bring all of these groups together and really start that idea of regionalism and how do we understand what a regional economy looks like. I think it's important to note that what we're doing is we're not coming in and saying, here's a program, use it. We're coming in and saying, what problem are we trying to solve? What problem exists here? And how do we help you develop and facilitate that problem-solving process? Not necessarily, here, take this and go and we walk away. It's more like, how do we facilitate that capacity building at a local level, which is incredibly important. We can jump to the next slide. Has a little bit of community feedback, and I think more than anything, the important part here is that we're continually evolving that program to listen to feedback on the ground and make changes so that it works for folks. If we jump to slide 10, you can think about the Business Council with two different sort of parallel tracks. And that is at a community infrastructure level. We help with community infrastructure for growth. Okay. And that's the thing. Business Ready Communities is about how do we utilize infrastructure to help a community expand or grow, not necessarily how do we keep their water system as it is running. Those are two distinct problems, both incredibly important. I think they're both worthy of the same attention. But we tend to focus on growth with the Business Ready Communities program. The other thing we work on is business growth. And those are programs that are intended to really help the business community thrive, whether that's reducing regulation, whether that's removing those barriers, or whether it is filling in a gap that exists because of our sparse population and our low workforce. Those are elements that we work on. And so if we jump to the next couple slides, if we jump to slide 12, as Mr. Smith mentioned, we are...
Question here, Josh. Yes, go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the previous slide, 10, when we talk about business growth, I heard a lot of kind of big words there, kind of big ideas, but can you give me an example? Can you give me 3 examples in the last 3 years of how the Business Council closed the gap to unlock private sector investment?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Nethercott, thanks for that. So yeah, I'll give you one example that's local. Also jump forward to a slide to show you some more, actually 2 examples that are local. So the Business Ready Communities program is a way to do that. And so in Evansville here, there was a company, Mesa Solutions. They provide natural gas generator sets for the energy sector all over the country, but also they're expanding dramatically. Their manufacturing plant is here in Casper. And they were looking at, can we continue to expand here in Casper and do work, or do we need to move locations, frankly? It was that stark. And one of the things that we did is we worked with them to not provide them money, but we provided infrastructure that unlocked a big portion. So if you traveled north on I-25 today and you were able to look out to the right side of right after Hat 6 there, you would see a business park that is happening, an industrial park, and a really beautiful building that is being built by that company. We did the really sexy stuff like water and sewer to unlock that growth. So there's hundreds of acres now available for industrial use. So that is an example of helping a business grow here. Their operation and their manufacturing will now increase dramatically from the location that they currently have in Casper.
Two more examples.
Absolutely. Another example is also just happens to be it's fun that we're here. There's a company that started out with an idea and some technology from the University of Wyoming. In almost every stage of that business's, the company is called DISA, every stage of that business's growth, a Wyoming Business Council program helped propel them to the next stage. They started with Kickstart back in 2018. They utilized our trade show incentive grants at the time to make sure that to do product market fit. They were able to utilize innovation funding, which we'll talk about in a bit. And finally, they were able to use the YVC, which is our utilization of the federal funds as venture capital into their company. They've now propelled themselves into a place where, frankly, they're sort of beyond the programs that we have today. And so that's another example. And then the final example, if we might jump, maybe this is the way to do this, and we'll jump ahead to slide 15. I'm gonna get an 11 for maybe here, 11 for one. So my final example is what's known as our YVC program. It's our venture capital program. We realized that there was a challenge in Wyoming in that there wasn't enough capital to attract a deal flow. And there wasn't enough deal flow to attract capital. That chicken and egg problem is something that we were able to find a federal program and utilize federal funds to unlock potential in Wyoming. And so if you look at this is another success story. 11 companies were invested in. We invested out of the YVC fund, not quite $20 million, but that attracted $162 million to those businesses from other areas. That's private capital invested. And you can see that's a 9-to-1 leverage ratio. So that's a tremendous amount of money coming into businesses in this state to help them grow. And as I mentioned, with DISA, that helps propel those companies to the next place so that they are a business that could approach, really global scale problems. Senator Nethercott, that was that one. So one more past the 13. I'm happy to do another one. Yes.
So I think, Mr. Chairman, if I can, one of the hard parts, I think, for the public and for the legislature and everyone to appreciate is actual real life stories of billboards we see, of construction occurring, of employees we know, rather than, because we in the legislature, we get these big numbers all the time.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're so big, it's just amazing,
Mhm.
always incredible, always more state money, because there's always these statistics of 9-to-1 leverage ratios, but we really don't get to question that in any meaningful way.
Yeah.
We get your PowerPoint slide that looks fantastic, that looks just absolutely incredible, out of this world results. Not really seeing that. It doesn't feel like on the ground.
Mhm.
And so maybe perhaps giving us more real world examples. So we have Mesa, we have DISA. Give me a third.
Happy to give you a third. Another one is what I would call power theory. And they're again, a startup in Laramie, Wyoming that is approaching a challenge for big companies around the United States about maintenance and making sure that they're taking care of their maintenance. They're utilizing a software as a service platform to do that. And that in some ways looks a lot like DISA, but 20 years ago, or excuse me, 10 years ago.
And just as a follow-on, Senator, I think what's exciting is we can talk through these 11 companies. We can talk to ones that have been involved with Kickstart. Like Miss Lawley, there's one from, sorry, Representative Lawley, there's one from your neck of the woods that have a great product around firefighting buckets that hang from helicopters. And typical good old fashioned Wyoming innovation of manufacturers weren't making what they needed. So they figured one out for themselves. They came to the business council, workshopped their proposal for that capital and walked away with a Kickstart grant. Lots of those examples, but very, very much heard and understood, Senator, of putting the real world, not just company names, but who are the people, who are the genuine stories behind who we're supporting, because there are a lot of those that are supported, but needing to be able to put that to faces, names for everybody. So thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just very specific examples or requests from I think this committee or what I'm going to be requesting. It's a great presentation, but when we have 11 Wyoming companies invested in, I want a footnote that lists those 11 companies. Because I want to know who they are, and so does the public.
Before you go on, that is an interesting thing with that Mesa. We're building a big building out there, but they're vacating 13 rental buildings, which of course become available for oil and gas companies to utilize. So it isn't just Mesa moving out there and vacating 13. It's 13 new ones going to be able to use those buildings. We don't know exactly who all is going to go in those, but that is great economic development for Evansville, Casper area. We had a question down here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I have a quick, I'm kind of following up on Senator Nethercott's question. It seems to me that most of the programs that you're citing as successes is where you guys help find funding. I think what we want to hear is more like Mesa's, to where there's actually foundations being poured, pipe in the ground, along that kind of thing. Can you guys tell me what you're doing under your current format to stop leakage in the communities? Because to me, community development is where we're pumping money into that community. Much of the projects that I see have out-of-state workers that come in on these big projects and put undue burdens on our local services. And most of that money does not stay in the community. They come in perhaps for whatever reason, they stay in another town. The communities are not set up to catch this loss. I guess what I want to know is, give me an example of where we've done something that the community is benefiting, that they're making money off of this, not being burdened unduly. Because I think a lot of times you guys look at the dollar bill that the corporation is making, and you do not look at the community that the corporation is going into. So when you do these construction things like Mesa, there's a lot of workers here, but they're all from out of state. So that money is going out of state. What do you do to stop that leakage and keep that money in state, sir?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, boy, that's a good one. Because you know, our purview is probably not everything. So I will say that does occur. I don't know who Mesa chose to build their building. They're funding that on their own. We're funding the infrastructure to it, so the water, sewer, making sure that there are roads and things like that. But let me get to your question just to clarify it. That is true, and there are times when construction companies come in, they do work, and then they leave, and that is part of growth, and I understand that. Our real focus is to build that capacity after a project as well. And so when a community does a project, the capacity is built. The things like the revenue, generally speaking, in a community, I don't control the revenue system in Wyoming, but I can tell you that in certain counties, and down in the southeast portion of the state, where big construction projects have come in. And as a result, over the course of 10 or 15 years, their revenue base is really, really big, and the construction has never stopped. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I think it is something that we'll continue to look at or be part of that conversation, but we just don't own the whole thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that answer, Mr. Durrell. But I'm going to dive down a little bit deeper. When you guys did your opening introduction, we were talking about the cart and horse mentality, and I'm going to give you very specifics on the town of Glen Rock, Wyoming. I have a question for both of you guys. First, I have a question that I need a direct answer on. What's the first thing you guys do? If you're going to go to a new town, what's the first thing you do? What's the very first thing you do? What's the very first thing you check?
Mr. Co-Chair, Representative Campbell, we always look at the individual community and the growth challenges that are presented there.
Okay, well, this is where I'm getting at, sir. Pardon me, Mr. Chairman. In Glen Rock, Wyoming, in Converse County, you guys through the years have put millions of dollars into McGinley Clinic. I agree. I think it's a good project. Wonderful. You guys created 40 high-tech jobs in Glen Rock. I have more wind projects than any other district in the state of Wyoming in my district. I've got solar projects. I've got wind projects. I've got hydrogen projects. Now, amazingly enough, Glen Rock, Wyoming, if you go and you look on their tourism board and you look at how much lodging tax that Glen Rock, Wyoming generated, the answer is none. Yet somehow Converse County has increased their overall lodging tax by 20%. Douglas, Wyoming has 3 new motels under construction as we speak. So what I am seeing is a town that is the utility corridor, Glen Rock, that is gifted with all of these large projects. Now, my question to you, sir, is if we saw fit to throw $5 million, say, or $3 million, we'll keep it low. If we saw fit to put $3 million into a high-tech aerospace company in this little town, should we not have a motel there? I mean, do we really need a survey? Do we need to go out into the communities for 10 weeks to identify that problem? I'm a little chuffed with some of these soft answers. I would like some harder answers, please, sir.
Chairman Anderson, Representative Campbell, a couple things. One, if you later, I want to learn more about the root of the word chuff. I want to understand that one. But the other thing, sir, is that you're absolutely describing the challenge that we face. So one of the things that I think is hard to understand is we don't come in and solve all of a community's problems. We don't do all of those things. The community drives a lot of that, and I want to facilitate that. I definitely don't want to come in and say it. Now, of like, hey, you need this, so thou shalt do it. I think you are describing the rub that all, not just small, but all of the communities in Wyoming face. And that is, how do we have the capacity in the know-how and also the resources in order to take advantage of the growth we see around us? And so I think you and I are actually solving the same problem. And the way you're describing it is good, and I'm glad you are. The short answer is, I would love to see an application from the town of Glen Rock for infrastructure to open up a new area where a motel could be built. I would love to see that application, sir. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Durrell, no offense, but I think your business model is flawed. I think that the way that you guys are moving forward currently is very flawed, and that is the reason why you guys are in the position that you're in. And when I say your business model is flawed, I have spent many years in the oil field service industry. And the premise that I am going to give you is in 2012, I was tasked with establishing a bunker head in the Bakken Three Forks basins in North Dakota. Back in those days, Williston was a farm town. They did not have the infrastructure. So I'm not picking on you. I'm telling you there is a way to do this. And your current business plan is not it. When you come in with this top-down approach, which is what you do, I don't want to place blame just on you. The SLIB board, the Industrial Siting Council, they approve these large projects. You go out and solicit large projects. You do not interact with the community. When you say that you want to come up from the grassroots, you're not. You're bringing in a great big company from out of state, bang, make it fit, and it's not working, and the people hate it. That's the reason why we're here. I fought for you guys on the House floor because I believe you have purpose, and I very much do believe you have purpose. But you're going to have to entirely structure how you do things. I'm willing to listen to testimony through today. I'm going to address both chairman and co-chair that myself, Representative Schmidt, a couple other representatives have got some ideas on how to restructure this by business plan into where we have metrics. So with that being said, I'm just being straight up with you. With that being said, we have problem solution is what we have been working on. Since I've spoke with you, I expect this from you. I met you in the town of Glen Rock, you and Ron, back last August. And remember the problems we had? Remember that town? You know what's changed since then? We lost 2 more businesses. So just know that it's going to be with problem solution already in hand that I'm going to be listening to your answers, sir. Thank you.
That'd be good if you could come up with some ways to fix this, some good ideas. JT, what have you got?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Thank you both for being here. Kind of talking about, kind of along those lines that we just heard. But my question kind of, I think addresses a problem that I think I see you guys have to face is how can you be everything to everyone all at one time, everywhere? And, you gave 2 examples of projects in Casper that have been successful, but, Rock Springs wants projects like that. Gillette wants projects like that. Sheridan, Worland, everyone wants projects like that. Everyone wants to see those things. But I think that's something that we have to address through this process is because there's jealousy among communities when one community gets something from the business council, but the other, there's just not enough money to go around to help with all that. So I guess just what are your thoughts on that and how do we move forward with that type of mentality and thinking?
Wonderful.
One more question? No?
Sure.
Oh,
So,
Mr. Chairman?
yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So one of the opportunities for this summer with the interim, I think, is to provide more specific explanation on what the Business Council does. I do think it actually would be beneficial for us to go through that 96-page packet or whatever it is that Mr. Fuller prepared, actually line by line by line, or open up the statute books to see what we have directed the Business Council to do. So our frustrations or our perceived frustrations, whether they are appropriately based or not, may come directed back to us in what we've written in the statutes. Because my impression is exactly the opposite, and this is the joy of working for the legislature. You're not top down enough. So you heard my colleague say you're too top down. I don't think you're top down enough. And I don't think that our subject matter expertise for economic development are leading the conversation in the state of Wyoming in a more direct way. Instead, you're responding to big companies and you're not recruiting enough of them, candidly, because we don't really recruit that well. I think we like to think we do, but we don't, because recruiting is difficult. Most of those companies from out of state coming in are coming for the assets that we already have as opposed to a recruitment program. So I do think we could do better at recruitment, and we don't do enough of recruitment. So I actually would like to see more of that, and more of a top-down to direct what that economic development should look like rather than being all things to all people. But a self-reflection on the legislature and our statutes to understand whether or not the business council is failing in what we think their job should be as opposed to what the statutes actually say. And so that's where this summer will be an incredible learning experience for all of us and all of the state.
JR, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Referring to Mr. Fullerton's report, I have a question in that category. So there's about 12 major categories of business development you have, and probably 30 sub-programs within those categories. One of them in particular says science, technology, and energy financial aid. So I'm wondering, where does the Wyoming Business Council and the Wyoming Energy Authority either cross over or separate? And because I see when you're talking about energy development, I guess I think about WEA. How does that work out?
One more question. Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do appreciate the comments of some of my members on the committee here about what we've tasked the Business Council to do, how they're doing that, what's the role of local governments in terms of development agreements with businesses and things like that. We've got a new term now, which is an important term actually, but it's come to the surface about community development. But again, I wonder if we have a good definition of that, because I think that is a part of economic development as I understand it. But again, we don't really have a working definition, but that is part of doing it. And I agree with the idea that we need to do more from the top. And sometimes that will involve development of communities, especially where I live, where it's very rural and we don't have some of the basic structure there. But on the other hand, I feel like without these definitions, it's hard to have these conversations. I'm looking forward to the Wyoming Association of Municipalities testimony later, because there is a role of local government here that no one, I believe, ever intended the Wyoming Business Council to take over that role or to guess what they might want. And even whether or not there's another part of our government, to the extent there's a state involvement through things like SLIP board, like where, again, more community development might have. So to me, there's a lot on the table here. But I think we start with what the statutes say. I want to have us move towards some definitions, working definitions that help us navigate this space and understand the role. I mean, I have seen local governments in Wyoming that have done amazing jobs through community development agreements with businesses to protect their communities. For example, some of the things raised here. I don't view that as really the Wyoming Business Council's job, but maybe it's in there somewhere in that 96 pages. But I think these are the conversations we do need to be having here and talking about. But I have some ideas on solutions too, but the thing is, I don't think I understand well enough yet all of these moving parts to offer something that I think is not just a prefabbed solution or a certain solution that meets certain people's interests. I think I want to understand this problem better and have a solution that fits Wyoming, because we do have approaches to problem solving that are unique, because we are a unique people and a unique state. Let's work towards that, and that's what I'd like to see. I know there's not really a question in there, except if you've got a good definition of community development. That's good. I'd like to hear, because it's part of it. But we are operating without common understandings of many of these terms. And I think the forward moving to solutions, we need to sort of develop some common understandings. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Mr. Co-Chair, I see where the direction is going right now with the committee. We're trying to give some guidance, what we want to talk about for the rest of the morning. Some of the topics that we want to discuss, some of the solutions that we want to hear about, kind of a path forward for this morning and for the next few weeks as we come to the next meeting. But one of the things I want to praise the Wyoming Business Council on their efforts to educate, advise, and consult with the communities. I've been in some of those meetings where you have provided consultation services for communities that are struggling with economic development. You have a great team. You facilitate those meetings, you draw the fishbone and you look at all the obstacles. I want to hear more about that, some of the strengths that you have so we can play upon some of those strengths. Because some of our small communities do not have the staff to be able to deal with economic development. And I see that as a strength of the Wyoming Business Council. So I want to hear a little bit more about that. But on the other side of the coin, we've invested $1 billion in the Wyoming Business Council since its inception. And I want to hear from the communities, would they want to continue with that kind of investment for the next 20 years? Or would they rather have that $1 billion just given back to the communities to invest in their own infrastructure? That's what it comes down to from our perspective. Do we continue on this trajectory, or do we just give that money in the next 20 years directly to the towns, to the counties, and let them decide through something similar to the consensus grant program, where local communities decide what's important and where to invest that $1 billion in the next 20 years. So there's some strengths in the Wyoming Business Council. I want to play upon those. I want to see how we can utilize those in the future. But during this next year, we're going to come to a decision point. Do we continue along this path? Do we find a fork in the road and go a different direction? Or do we strengthen what we have? And I've seen your team in action, Mr. Director Drell. You have some very good people. They know what they're talking about. When they get into these economic meetings where the towns and communities are struggling, what do we do? How do we go about this? They help navigate that. And I think that advisory and consultation is very important. We need that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Representative Campbell, did you have another addition?
Yes, I do. I would like to ask the chairman, I believe that I have a viable working solution that can solve pretty much everything. I would like to have the opportunity to be transparent about it and to discuss it in open committee, to where instead of just talking about what we're going to do, let's get the ball rolling. I'm not coming here making accusations without having a defensible solution behind me. I believe that I have a defensible solution, and I would like to be transparent about it with this committee, and I'm not exactly sure how to proceed with it.
And that's good, Representative Campbell, and that's something we'll work on next meeting when we try to formulate what we're going to do. So let's let you guys answer all those questions.
Chairman Anderson, first of all, committee, thank you. So what you just exhibited, if you will, is the rub. Let me just say, you're all right. And we're all going to have to work together on it, because all of those things can be true at the same time, and they are. We're not top down enough. We're too top down. Our statute tells us to do everything, and our statute maybe needs to tell us to do less. We're being directed by a body that understands their local communities, but maybe not necessarily has the full view of the interactions that we need to have. And we're having that right now. And we need to have it more than just right now. And so, one, I'm super excited. I'm super excited about solutions that you might have and how we can see how that can fit. I'm excited about getting rid of some of the dead weight that might exist in our statute today. so that it better aligns with the problem that we have, as well as better sets us up for the future. I love this question about, where do we take the money that we've put into the business council and should it be put somewhere else? And my answer is yes, because it's not one thing or the other. It's going to be a lot of these things. It's absolutely going to be a lot of these things. There are challenges at our community level that I applaud you for digging into, because the questions you're asking and the ideas that you're throwing forth are going to make a difference if we continue to work on them. Now, what I will say is that we're going to get this entire summer to start working on this. This is the beginning of working. Probably, I want to just say, can we be an interim topic always? Because that's what it's going to take. This isn't a one and done. It's not a 3 meeting and done thing. This is a forever problem. And so I'm excited. What I will tell you is that you have the right questions, and I think you have people in this room right now with some of the right answers, but also the ability to understand the problem. And that's what you're doing. So I'm happy to continue to talk about individual programs. I do want to just make sure that everyone knows the examples that I was showing today are just that. They're examples. That is not the full breadth of the services or the programs that the Business Council has today. It's an example to say, look, we're in this. When we focus on something, we can clean it up and get better. We've cut a lot of programs. We've added programs. We've enhanced or fixed programs that maybe weren't giving the results that we wanted. It's interesting, Co-Chairman Heiner, 6 years ago when I came to this job, people said, we're tired of all this spreading it around like peanut butter and giving all the communities everything they want every time. We need ROI. And so we changed that. The challenge is we actually do need more for our communities. Our communities have struggles that we can't touch even with that amount of money. And so I think you're asking the right question. And I think that it's going to be yes and. It's likely that those are two distinct things, but they're linked, because you can't grow a community that can't handle their water system, right? And that is exactly where we are. I just applaud the committee for tackling this for real. And if it took the questions of defunding, and if it took the sort of saving the Business Council to bring these questions to light, then by golly, thank goodness. All those sleepless nights were worth it, because this is what we've wanted from the beginning, which is an honest conversation about the challenges our communities face. So I'm in. We're all in. So we have some things that in the between now and the next meeting that we'd like to talk with you about to see if they make sense. But it sounds like to me, you got a bunch of them too, and I'm all in.
Brian Fuller.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to respond to the questions that Representative Riggins and Representative Lawley brought up. First, Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, for that Science, Technology, and Energy Financial Aid Program, I don't see anything in statute, both in the Business Council statute and the Energy Authority statutes, that link that program with one another, link that Business Council program with the Energy Authority. There's one mention in the Energy Authority statutes that require that authority to consult and coordinate with entities, including the Business Council, which is explicitly named, in the development of energy projects in the state. Then, Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, in terms of a definition of economic development, I see no definition of that term in the Economic Development Act, so in Title IX, Chapter 12. The only definition I see in statute that may be of some interest or utility is in the Community Development Authority statutes. So in 97103A4, there is a definition of economic development project. And it is a pretty, I would say, specific definition in that it's limited to land, building, or other improvement and all real and personal property, including machinery and equipment suitable for specific purposes. So things like airports, healthcare, manufacturing, warehousing certain products, industrial parks, sewage. So that is the only definition in statute I see of, that's, even remotely related to economic development.
Yes. Senator Russell.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this discussion is obviously important, and I appreciate the diversity of topics and discussion that we've had, but I think there's a few important things that really need to be raised. First and foremost, everything the Business Council does is a program that this committee created. It's in statute and they're carrying out statute. And if you don't like the programs, we created the programs. I think they're carrying them out pursuant to law. And honestly, many of the programs, I don't think anyone in this room has probably heard a single concern about. That's real. We talk about it at this high hand-waving level. But the reality is we've got this list of programs, and I'd challenge folks to really dig into this list and realize whether they heard anything negative about specific aspects of this list. And there'll be one exception I'll get to in a minute. Most of these things are working as planned. They're not necessarily giant impacts, but they add seeds to help cultivate a business development community in the state. And individually, if we asked our good friends up here to go through examples of each of these and how they succeeded, there's going to be a storyline for each of them. So I think it's important to realize that we're talking at a high level, but we're not really digging into specific concerns of programs. The one exception to that, because it's the biggest, most political kind of mainline topic, is the Business Ready Community Grant and Loan Program. Mostly grant program is what people are concerned about. And that's because tens of millions of dollars go into it. It's political. It's decided through a political process, not necessarily an administrative or expert process. It starts off administrative and expert, and then it goes to politics, and then we fight about it. And since I've been in the legislature, well, since we've been dealing with this, it's been a topic of contention. And I guess the question I have for the Business Council, and really a challenge for the committee, is to understand what you're complaining about. To go through the specific programs. Does anyone here really have big concerns about the Kickstart Grant Program? And if so, how would you change the Kickstart Grant Program to make it better? Does anyone have problems with the Small Business Innovative Research Match Grant, which we did entirely defund? It won't be funded this year. Exceptional program. It's done great things. It's gone for this year, and that's a real regret. If so, what are those challenges? What can we do better in those specific instances? And it might benefit us, honestly, to maybe have a little bit of a write-up tying these things into specific projects pursuant to what Senator Nethercott was talking about, a narrative for each of them that shows a great success story where we started with this program, or maybe as you were saying a moment ago, they might have used a few different programs, kind of mapping that out so we can see the value of these. And if you are hearing specific feedback that some of these programs aren't working, that's important for us to know also. This committee has eliminated at least 10 programs through the Business Council since I've been on the committee because they weren't working. They were deemed ineffective. We heard testimony for the reasons and we eliminated them. We tried other things. Kickstart was created, Startup was created, and these may or may not be working well, but that kind of feedback is important. But if the concern really is with how Business Ready Communities Grant and Loan Program is being pushed out, I think the committee should really focus on is that the problem? And if so, that's going to make our lives a lot easier if we only have to focus really on one program and fix the statute around one program and say go forth and conquer with the other 30-ish that are already on the list. So I'd ask for some thoughts on that approach, Mr. Durrell, and also on the capacity for next time to maybe provide us pursuant to Senator Nethercott, some individual narratives for each of these where we can see how it works on the ground for our communities.
Before you answer that, in 1998, the legislature formed the Business Council because it was obvious we weren't doing a very good job of economic development in Wyoming. We didn't have people to talk to these businesses to bring them on board. So we wanted somebody that would do that and do that day in and day out. And obviously, you've put together an incredible menu here to do that, just exactly the bidding of the legislature, and are carrying it out very well, something the legislature couldn't do. And we will see that we don't have the expertise to carry these kind of things out. We have a severe problem in Wyoming right now with anti-business people objecting to everything we want to do. And this isn't anything you guys have done, but just recently we lost Radiant Energy, 250 jobs here in Casper area, just because we had so many people object to that they might have some uranium stored there. We've lost wind projects, and maybe those are justifiable. I don't know. We've got a lot of wind projects, like Representative Campbell says, but we've got a lot of objections to wind projects, which are economic development. Data centers are getting a lot of objection because they might use some of my water. And so we've got all these emotional issues that now we're trying to overcome to do this. I just heard a presentation on pump storage and why it should be blocked. And maybe it should be, I don't know. But we've got organizations out there that are working hard to make sure economic development does not happen in Wyoming. We've got the man camp south of Cheyenne that's running into a major resistance in that, and they've got to do something for those 800 employees. We also have housing in Cheyenne that's been blocked. All these things are blocked, and none of them are any of you guys' projects. Your projects go through, and you've got to overcome all these kind of things that we didn't have anybody working on, overcoming all those problems with these issues. So we realize you've got a huge job, and we realize that we are not capable of managing those kind of things. So thank you for what you do. One question down here, Representative Campbell.
Mr. Chairman, I will be thorough but succinct. I'd like to follow up on Senator Rothfuss and Senator Nethercott's comments. I very much agree with what was said. We need to look through the statutes. I very much agree. There are a lot of requests that the legislation has made upon this body that nobody knows about. I think Senator Rothfuss brought up a very valid point. However, there are very valid points against, and it's the results. It's the negative. We've spent a lot of money for what we've got is the general complaint. So when I brought up problem solution and I said that I had a solution, please bring that in mind, that the solution is also within statutory requirements. However, we are trying to increase those positive results to where we are actually engaging with the community. We can have metrics to where we can judge, we can gauge things by. Our current system that we're following follows nothing but soft metrics, but contacts and reviews. So I would like to identify not having specific metrics to evaluate performance is one of the criteria that we need to look into. And we need to look at established timeframes for when we can accomplish things, again, to set a baseline so we have metrics on to judge success or failure. And with the solution, I think that the proof is in the pudding. We won't have to research too hard. Thank you.
Thank you. You have some answers?
Yep. Chairman Anderson, to answer Senator Rothfuss's questions about specific stories and our ability to create or link specific stories, successes to each of those programs, absolutely. We will be happy to do that. We'll be able to do that and provide it to this committee between meetings. But we'll also be able to speak to those if necessary. And maybe what we can do is use those to say, and this change to a statute or this particular element could change and maybe we'd get more. I mean, our approach is that what is working, we should, like a business, we should fund more into that, or we should focus more into the things that are working and not just sort of spread it around. In terms of the BRC focus, I'm intrigued because there are definitely some things that the business ready community statute could have that would take it out, maybe out of the political lens and utilize the expertise of our team and others that we're working with. Communities that, and remember, it is communities that apply for the business ready communities programs. It is municipalities, counties, joint powers boards, and tribal entities that can apply to those. And those are publicly owned assets. Those application processes can take a year to do. And the rigor with which we scrutinize those and work them through the system is pretty extreme. I think you would hear from people who say, gosh, that was really tough, but the project was a good one because of it. But then it comes to this level at the end where all of a sudden it's a political question. And then we don't always get to do the right thing because of the politics of it. And so I think you're right. I think it's a really good area to focus because I think some small changes can have a big impact on the way that works. I would also appreciate the focus on BRC because it is the most controversial thing that the Business Council does, probably because it's the least known thing that the Business Council does with the biggest dollar amount. And so you sort of have this confluence of all of these challenges. Let's tackle that one. That would be awesome. We'd love it.
And I would like to add in, just if I may, just wanted to address a couple things. First of all, Chairman Heiner, I would like to commend you for getting involved in those community efforts in your community and really being in that educational process. I agree that the staff that works through those and puts those on, I've seen it in my own community as well. The impact of that is great. And if there's an opportunity, would love to see more of your fellow legislators involved in those. And I think that's something we need to make sure that we as the Business Council are doing a better effort and making sure that you guys can be involved. This is great to hear from a board perspective because it's a lot of the similar issues to what we're wrestling with and trying to create as a path forward. Senator Rothfuss and Senator Nethercott, you both hit nails on the head of things that are a prime focus. Looking at SLIB and what is their part in the approval process is something that is part of what we're currently looking into in regards to that board composition conversation and where can decision-making effectively be made. Because you're right, it gets very tricky when you have folks who are experts in something that do an evaluation and then taking it to the next step removed from experts can lead to some difficult or some interesting results. And I think that point of successes and feedback is really well taken in that too, but also learning from the failures. What are the things that may have been taken to SLIB or may have been taken forward and either failed or had been voted to not continue and were funded? To your point, Senator or Representative Heiner, around the amount of the money of projects that's funded. We need to look at that, and that's part of what we're looking at is what was funded and how did that break down. So some great things here. I've got 3 pages of notes and I hope to have at least 3 or 4 more by the time I leave of things to consider. But
I had one down here, I think.
No,
Were you? Oh, you're good.
Yeah,
Okay.
he hit it.
Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, appreciate the discussion. I want to tag on to Senator Rothfuss's comments about trying to narrow this focus a little bit, but I don't want to too much narrow it, and here's why. I represent a very rural district surrounded by many rural districts in the Bighorn Basin. And in the Bighorn Basin, we want Wyoming to succeed overall. but we also understand we live in a different kind of environment that maybe doesn't always produce the big numbers of jobs and help our communities move along. And honestly, every community within that rural area is unique. And so any cookie cutter or sort of programmed approach is, as you've already have learned, is not very effective because, and so I would like something in what you provide that would relate to something about how this has impacted rural communities. And I know every one of these may not fit exactly in that space, but I do want us to not forget our rural communities who need often a different kind of help, a different kind of approach to economic development where they are today, where they want to go. And you pointed out earlier, Director Durrell, that sometimes it is really what we might bring to them. They don't really have the infrastructure yet. So I don't know where all this fits together on that, but I just understand that there does need to be an eye to that. I mean, obviously, that's not where most of the focus and most of the work of the Business Council should go, and I'm not advocating that it should, but I think it should be precise and should, there we can be a lot more agile. And I would like to see that from these programs we're looking at. Because some of my thing isn't about the program itself, it's about, does it well fit, or can it be altered in some way? Some different criteria for certain definitions of rural areas that really impact what they need. And because I would just tell you the feedback mostly has to do with, we don't really fit that program, but we could fit, but yet it's not really made for us. And so I don't know how to solve that problem, but I'd like to know where there are successes or where there could be some modifications made perhaps that would say, okay, to rural communities, we know you don't have all this. So here's the way we're going to have this program interact with you and see if it will work for them.
Representative Campbell, you have one more?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to throw it out there. You guys mentioned that a lot of times you guys interacted with the SLIB board and they had a large bearing on your guys' performance. I would like to also reflect upon your interaction with the Industrial Siting Council, how you guys interact with them, with their projects as well. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, there you go. Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, I think this might be a question for Mr. Fuller. I'm just wondering if in statute we have anything about the number of employees. I think it's important if we're examining this, we need to make sure if we have too many employees or do we have too few employees, how they're located in the state, if there's anything on that, if we have them sprinkled throughout, and if there's stipulations on how the funds are used, distributed as salaries.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Jones, this information is on page 4 of the material that Budget Fiscal that Ms. Martineau provided that talks about the employee positions. So the legislature, and I assume you mean the Business Council employees, not like employment in the state, correct? Okay. So the legislature does not authorize employee positions for the Business Council. But in the Business Council's budget, there is authorization and specific money that's given for the 100 series, which is the personnel services or personal services appropriation. So that would be the money that would be available for the employees. But there is no, as far as I know, there's no specific language in statute or in their budget, say a budget footnote, for example, that says where employees must be located, what employees, which employees have to have what duties. That is left to the discretion of the Business Council and its board.
Follow up? No? Would you like to answer some questions?
Mr. Co-Chair, as my Mr. Co-Chair stated, I've mostly taken a lot of notes on the things that we can display. I think to touch on, I think the industrial siding is going to be something this afternoon we'll talk about. We're in that process. We are part of that process. However, a smaller piece than generally than other programs. Representative Lawley, I love your question because it turns out that every one of our communities faces something a little bit different. And one of the things that we found is that cookie cutter approach doesn't work. And that sometimes the investment is the secondary thing. And we actually don't lead with investment. I know that it feels like that because we mention a lot of, dollars or what hit the slides, but we actually focused first on the capacity building and the understanding of the problem and solving the problem correctly. Most of the time when somebody comes and says, I need $1 million to do this, and I'm just using that number, that's not big enough to do much in anywhere. But I need $1 million. We say, well, what problem are you trying to solve? And we dig in with that. And what I'll tell you is the Bighorn Basin has really taken advantage of the assessment to action program. There have been a number of communities that have worked on that as a community, and now they're even getting together as a region to share the results, to have a summit, to understand the problems that are region-wide and see where they're common. And so I know that you are the chair of a committee next week and cannot attend that summit, but I would say, Senator Cooper, if you are available in the Bighorn Basin to go to that and see it in action, I think you'd really, I think we would get a lot out of your presence there, and we would also really like to have you see what goes on in these situations, because we're not just trying to throw money at a problem. We're trying to solve the right problems, and frankly, we're trying to facilitate the right answers, not necessarily give them. And I think that that's the beauty of that. So thanks for mentioning that. What we have found out of those is the right problems that exist, and maybe we're not the right ones to solve it, but we at least have identified what it is. And I think that that's a really big step. And sometimes it is us that could put the water line in or put the infrastructure in or whatever. But many times it's not. So thank you for that. And we'll be happy to provide more information on those programs and how they fit.
Representative Lawley, I'd love to answer, or I guess add in, there are absolutely different environments when you look at our more rural communities versus our more urban. I mean, Wyoming, I wouldn't say we have anything that's incredibly urban, but seeing a lot of success with some of our, even just our loan programs, like our succession loan programs. How do we help keep those local businesses going from one owner to another, and really helping our communities to continue to thrive, because they still have a taxidermy shop, they still have a butcher shop, being able to continue those businesses. But again, how do we meet people where they're at? And that really is the key. And as Mr. Durrell spoke to, sitting and meeting and going, we think this may be the issue, but let's work together. Let's ask why. Let's dig a little deeper. And looking towards what are longer term, not just how do we keep that one business running, but how do we keep Main Street open? How do we get more businesses on Main Street? That sort of thing.
More questions? JR. Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question. I was looking at your slide on the building blocks, and talks about recruiting new businesses and helping existing businesses. One of the frequent objections, I guess, or complaints I have is most often there's similar businesses that you're recruiting, and it's there's already a shortage of workforce and labor force in those fields, and it's impacting businesses that have been here for years. So I don't know what the answer to that is, but how you consider that. It'd maybe be different if you had a completely new business that wasn't drawing from the same workforce. Thank you.
Go ahead, Josh.
Mr. Co-Chair, Representative Riggins, that's a challenge in our smaller communities. One of the things that we're working to do is sort of get through that challenge, because when you create competition, it feels like a bad thing. But then when you create that competition, and I think that that's a really big benefit of our capitalist system is having competition. It creates a better situation for workers and for firms. What we found in areas where a cluster has actually been developed is that it is better for all employers and employees in that situation when there's competition. You can look to Sheridan, to their high-tech business park and the amount of manufacturing that's going on. At first, it felt like, oh gosh, now there's competition. And now it feels like, oh gosh, now there's a vibrant workforce with horizontal and vertical mobility that's really important. And I know one of the gentlemen that's speaking later can talk to that as well, as he's seen it on the ground in his community as an economic developer. That horizontal and vertical mobility is actually a benefit to the employers and the employees. So it feels tough in the moment, but in the long run, economically, it's a good thing that competition is. And so I hear what you're saying for sure. But we do our best to let people know that these things are coming but I think there is a rub there for sure.
And I would like to add in, you definitely have a great point, and hopefully that's something where this emphasis on regional planning and this drive that we're going towards on the regional planning is something that we can work for and look at and go, okay, in this region, we're anticipating an increased need of this type of workforce. How can we work as a cohesive unit, as a collaborative group within our communities to go, how are we going to attack this? How can we add workforce, whether it's through education or recruitment, et cetera, and start to use that idea, that rising tide with everybody. So you're not just someone's moving from company A to company B and from company B to company A, but instead gaining workforce.
Go ahead, GR.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We were just talking about on your chart where you had the scale for what brings young people to the state or stay. So we have these industries that have these skill sets, and there are jobs available. I don't know how many, 15,000 at any given time. There's jobs openings in the state of Wyoming, certainly in those fields. Is it because it's those fields and not different fields that we struggle to keep the people here? Or just like so many of us that live here now, many decades ago, came here for jobs. We didn't care what was here. If we could find a place to live, you could make a good living here, almost just out of high school, and that still exists today. And I don't know why we can't appeal to that. Now, there might be problems down the road because everybody had 2 or 3 roommates when you first moved here because you couldn't afford it here then, especially in 1979, 1980. So those things haven't changed. It's a similar condition what we have now. Expensive housing. I don't know, sometimes there's an expectation that you think you could just pay for that by yourself. You're just a single guy or a single woman working here. I don't think that's realistic and still make some money. So no answer needed now, but how do we address that? I mean, we have jobs and that stuff. So there seems to me some other reason why they don't gravitate here. Maybe because they drove here today. It was snowing. I don't know what it is. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Josh.
Co-Chairman Anderson and Representative Riggins, that's exactly it. It's a complex thing, and you're nailing it. There are a lot of factors here. I think, us digging in a little bit more, but there are also some other entities that are looking at that as well. I think that we'll see if we can't maybe partner with them and try to understand what they're doing. But I think workforce is an issue that we definitely touch, and hopefully we can work. I know there are some different areas of the state that have, particular groups of people that are in the private industry even that are working on these workforce challenges, and we can see what we can find from them. And we could see what we could provide to them because it's a complex animal that multiple agencies and multiple groups around the state are trying to tackle. So thanks for your mentioning exactly that. And I wouldn't be in Wyoming if it weren't for those plentiful jobs in the 70s that my family came for. So I hear you.
It is now 10:22 Mountain Daylight Time, and I can tell that the audience is ready for a break. And the staff is ready for a break, and so is the committee. So let's take about a 20-minute break and enjoy ourselves. We are still on the Wyoming Business Council and Economic Development Overview. We've still got 2 or 3 to do before noon probably. And you've got to be able to hear me. So Josh, we'll go ahead with whatever your next idea is.
Co-Chairman Anderson and members of the committee, I guess what I would like is, to continue to hear thoughts and to continue to understand the challenge that I think all of you are uncovering. In terms of information that I can provide, I am open to provide more, as I think Mr. Fuller put together a really good overview of everything and a detailed description of things. I think the question about information about each of the programs, the funding, the statutory, sort of the statutory references, as well as those folks who have utilized the programs, those types of information we'll put together as soon as possible. I obviously don't have that at my fingertips today, but I would say that from this point on, what I would like, if it's appropriate, is to say, we will deliver the information that the committee has asked for today. We will work with members of the committee to talk about those programs that work, the statutory changes that might make them work even better in between now and the next committee meeting, so that we can really kind of preload or front load that next meeting for some healthy discussion around those potential changes in programming and statutes. The other thing I might, I guess maybe I'll stop there for a second and see if that's appropriate to just say I'm happy to take in more information so that we can better inform the topics that we discuss between now and the next meeting.
Do have a question. Yes, Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Brown. I wanted to quickly ask about what's going to be the Business Council's role in the BEAD program. I know it's got a separate a major entity. What do you see your role in the broadband thing that was on your list here?
Mr. Co-Chair, Representative Riggins, our involvement in the BEAD program is that we are the state broadband office. We do have currently one employee who handles all of that, and we have contractors that help us with the administration of those BEAD funds. The broadband providers across the state have and will apply for areas in funding for the projects that they're looking at. So that is to provide that connection to really all of Wyoming's citizens. We are the administrators of that. So we handle all of the contracting. We handle all of the decisions about which projects and who is funded. And all of that money flows through us. So from the federal government to the providers. Did I answer your question, sir?
Follow up? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just looking at it, said 99% of it's funding or federal funding. And then it says original 10 million in state funds never been applied for. So basically all federal fundings, and you just liaison all that. And okay.
Mr. Co-Chair, Representative Riggins, that is correct.
And I think Representative Knapp had a question. Representative Knapp, did I catch you napping?
Never. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had kind of a general question, since you're reviewing, your board is reviewing your own programs and your own vision currently. I heard some, I guess, discussion, and I think you heard some discussion during session. Are there pieces that the board feels like could be handed off or dropped off that is necessary for you to refocus for instance, in session, we talked about the consensus funding that we used to have, and whether SLIB could take more of those dollars on for infrastructure projects, especially for rural communities. Are there any things that you guys have looked at that you feel are an impediment to your vision?
Josh, go ahead.
I'll field this
Oh,
one.
okay.
Chairman, Representative
Derek.
Knapp, thank you for the question. There is a lot of this board review that is around that same idea of what you brought up around, what can be dropped, what can be changed, what can be improved to be more efficient as an agency. So that absolutely is one of the focuses of what we're looking at.
And then Mr. Co-Chair and Representative Knapp, I think the specific topic that you brought up is really important, because I think that the discussion during the session was, should it be one or the other? Should it be infrastructure for growth or infrastructure for existence? And in our mind, it's both. And I don't think it's a one or the other proposition. They're both critically important, and you can't really have one without the other. And so, and again, you're going to hear from the folks in a moment that really have an on-the-ground understanding of the needs of the community. And I think it's important for us to pay close attention to that, because we are talking about a big challenge. And so I'm glad you're bringing that up, because it's really important for us to look at both of those elements and give them their due.
Other questions? Other questions? Other questions? If not, we're gonna let you off the hook for today, but of course, we'll see you next meeting and the next meeting. So thank you for your participation, and thank you for indulging us.
Mr. Co-Chair, I don't see it as an indulgement at all. I see it as exactly the way we hope this to work for not just the next 3 meetings, but maybe forever. So thank you.
Good, thank you. And I think we have up now is WIDA board.
Must be remote.
Yeah, that's how remote she is.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, if you'll give me 1 second, I'm just coordinating with LSO because we're a little bit earlier than we anticipated today.
We're showing you on the call-in, but we're going to eliminate you off the call-in.
Yes, sir.
Were you going to be remote?
Yes,
Actually,
sir. I rearranged my day to be here with you today.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Did you?
Yeah, we're way ahead of schedule. That's the way I run. Yeah, yeah. Way ahead of schedule.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Ashley Harpstreet. I am the Executive Director for Wyoming Association of Municipalities and also the Administrator for Wyoming Economic Development Association. We want to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today as a joint presentation representing the Wyoming County Commissioners Association, the Wyoming Association of Municipalities, and Wyoming Economic Development Association. Just a little history on our three organizations. WHAM is a 501c4 private nonprofit association and has been the foundation of support for all of Wyoming's 99 municipalities since our organization in 1928. We play a pivotal role in vital educational resources that enhance the capabilities of all local leaders. With a mission centered on advocating for the collective interests of cities and towns, we tirelessly promote policies that prioritize local decision-making, ensuring that the voices of 68% of the citizens who reside within these communities are heard and respected. Our goal is not to grow government, but to protect local autonomy, reduce taxpayer burden, and ensure that policies reflect the realities on the ground. Whether that's infrastructure, emergency services, or land use, as partners in shaping Wyoming's future, we exist to ensure those communities have a voice. Mr. Ryman was unable to be here today and has entrusted me with the messaging of his association. The Wyoming County Commissioners Association was established in 1976 as the unified voice of Wyoming's 23 counties. Created by Wyoming's county commissioners, the WCCA is owned and governed by its member counties. For nearly 5 decades, they have strengthened local government through collaboration, education, and advocacy. Their goal is to build resilient local leadership and ensure that the government closest to the people remains strong. Between WHAM and WCCA, we serve 100% of the citizens, businesses, and travelers that live, work, and play in our communities. In a joint venture with WIDA, recently WHAM has taken over their contract. They were established in 1985 and is a statewide nonprofit association representing nearly 50 economic developers and 200 strategic partners. It serves as a network connecting the professionals and organizations responsible for economic development across Wyoming. WIDA helps ensure that the local economic development perspectives are shared, coordinated, and aligned with broader statewide economic priorities. Not a funding or regulatory body, but it provides coordination, alignment, and practitioner insight. Today, we come before you with a shared message. Economic development in Wyoming must reflect Wyoming's realities. Ours is a state defined by a vast geography, rural distances, aging and costly infrastructure needs, workforce constraints, and an economy deeply connected to foundation industries such as minerals, agriculture, and tourism. Because of those realities, practical and locally driven solutions matter most. Wyoming's tax structure is uniquely tied to the mineral production. Unlike most states, we do not levy a personal or corporate income tax. Instead, our state and local governments rely heavily on mineral severance taxes and federal mineral royalties to fund essential services, infrastructure, and community needs. While this structure has served Wyoming well during periods of strong production, it also creates a fundamental vulnerability. When commodities markets shift, revenues decline often sharply, and communities across the state feel the impact directly in their budgets, their services, and the ability to plan for the future. This reality makes economic diversification not a policy goal, but an economic imperative. Strengthening and broadening our tax base through strategic economic development is essential to ensuring that Wyoming communities can sustain themselves regardless of what happens in global energy markets. With that said, we must better protect those markets and vertically align our efforts with what we do best, leveraging Wyoming's core strengths to build a more resilient and self-sustaining economic foundation. And I would note Mr. Detail and Mr. Obermueller did not pay me to say that. We 100% support them. Economic development does not happen by accident. It is not simply economic activity occurring on its own. It is deliberate and a strategic work of strengthening a community's prosperity, resilience, and tax base so it can support services, infrastructure, and quality of life over the long term. We often speak about the building blocks of economic development, and I was pleased to see the WBC leading off with that, as that was something that WIDA conceptually put together in the early 2000s. It's always the first layer and is always leadership and vision. Without strong local leadership and a clear sense of direction, sustainable growth is difficult to achieve. Communities know their assets, they understand their challenges, and are best positioned to identify opportunities that fit their region. That is why local leadership is essential, but local leadership alone is not enough. Success in Wyoming requires coordination between counties, municipalities, economic development professionals, industry partners, and state leadership. When those partners are aligned, Wyoming is better positioned to attract investment, support existing business, and expand opportunity to compete for the future. Our goal today is to share practical perspective from the local level on how Wyoming can strengthen that partnership and modernize its economic development approach for years ahead with specific examples and some structures to consider. Today, I'm joined with Brad Enzi, the CEO President of Laramie Chamber Business Alliance, to joint present. Next slide, please. Or this one, that one. Yep, thank you.
There we go. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Brad Enzi. I'm the CEO and President of the Laramie Chamber Business Alliance. We're the local Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development agency for Albany County. Today, I want to walk you through the layers and players of the economic development ecosystem in Wyoming that those of us working in the space have come to rely on. As a bit of warning, this is going to be a long list, sorted by levels, and while it's exhausting, it's not exhaustive, and at no point is probably all-inclusive. Additionally, this has a lot of alphabet soup in the mix. If at any point I throw out an acronym that you're unfamiliar with, feel free to check me up, slow me down, or ask a question. Economic development thrives when local implementers, regional connectors, state strategists, and private investors align tools, timelines, and trust. In short, economic development is a network system, not a single actor. Success depends on coordination among local implementers, regional connectors, those state strategists, and the private sector, each contributing capital, capacity, and credibility. Collaboration is truly the Wyoming model when we all work together. Because many Wyoming communities are smaller, success often depends upon partnerships among the municipal government, the county, the Chamber of Commerce, the EDO or Economic Development Organization, the utilities, community colleges, state agencies, and private employers. Economic development is most successful in Wyoming when it is locally led. Cities and towns best understand their assets, their constraints, their workforce needs, their business climate, and what their current infrastructure priorities are. Just to start listing through, in the public sector at local government, we have mayors and city councils, county commissioners, city counties, managers and administrators, planning and zoning departments, public works and utilities, including wastewater, roads, and broadband, the economic development boards of authorities, which many counties have, local finance directors and treasurers. Then at the regional level, we have the regional economic development organizations, councils of governments, such as they have in the Fremont County area, workforce development boards, regional planning commissions, multi-county infrastructure transportation authorities. And then when we roll up to the state level, we count on the governor's office and economic development advisors, the Wyoming Business Council and its programs, the Department of Workforce Services, the Department of Environmental Quality, the Wyoming Department of Transportation, Wyoming Water Development Office, SLIB, State Land and Investment Board, the State Engineers Department, and the University of Wyoming and community colleges for both entrepreneurial support, workforce, and research. At the federal level, we have the U.S. Economic Development Administration, the U.S. Rural Development Agency, through the USDA, the Department of Energy, the Department of Commerce, Small Business Administration, Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, the federal delegation, Senator Barrasso, Senator Lummis, and Congressman Hageman. And then at the private sector, we count on the developers. We count on industry anchors in energy, manufacturing, the data centers, logistics. We count on the financial institutions, both at the local and regional level, the banks, CDFIs, private equity, bond underwriters. Then we count on our engineering, architecture, and infrastructure firms within the state to be able to deliver the things we need to deliver projects. We constantly rely on technology and innovation companies, our Chamber of Commerce and Business Alliances, local employers and entrepreneurs, real estate and site selectors. We also count on our nonprofit and community partners, foundations and philanthropic organizations that infuse much needed capital into projects and initiatives. We count on workforce training nonprofits, housing and community development corporations, environmental and conservation groups, local leadership programs like Leadership Wyoming, educational institutions and research centers. We also count on the collaborative and convening entities, the economic development associations, WIDA, NLC, ICMA, regional alliances and task force, utility cooperatives and joint powers boards, public-private partnerships, and then the local EDOs and Chamber of Commerces that serve as a bridge between all of these entities. We also rely heavily on our supporting infrastructure players across the state, the broadband providers, power and energy utilities, transportation and logistics networks, water and wastewater authorities, and special districts. Next.
Mr. Chairman, we'll
Any
pause.
questions
Yeah.
after that list?
Could you go back over that list? I didn't quite catch that. I didn't quite get that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this time we'll do it in audible 2.0 speed.
Are you ready for questions?
We'll just, we have a lot more, Mr. Chairman,
Oh,
but we
okay.
just want to make sure there was no, okay,
Okay,
we're ready.
okay.
Next slide.
When we talk about economic development, it's first important to define what it actually is and what it's not. Economic development is not simply incentives, recruitment trips, ribbon cuttings. It is not government picking winners and losers, and it is not measured only by whether one project lands in a community. Economic development is the deliberate work of creating the conditions that allow private investment, job growth, business expansion, and a stronger tax base to happen over time. Economic vitality begins with keeping and taking care of what we already have, strengthening the industries, businesses, and people that have always been Wyoming's backbone. And a sound economic development strategy ensures we are doing that work intentionally rather than leaving our future to chance. For Wyoming communities, that means having infrastructure-ready sites with water, sewer, roads, broadband, and power. It means predictable permitting, regulatory clarity, and a process businesses can understand. It means a workforce and a housing capacity. That means local governments working together to provide a coordinated, business-ready, and business-friendly experience. What businesses consistently ask for in our world is straightforward. They want certainty, speed, infrastructure, talent, clear costs, and a community that wants them to succeed. That is why strategy matters. Economic development does not happen by accident. Communities that are successful typically have a plan, understand their assets, know their priorities, and are ready when the opportunity comes. And not every effort results in an immediate win. Economic development is competitive. It's a gloves-off game. And even projects that do not land can strengthen readiness, relationships, and reputation for the next opportunity. These strategies build upon each other over time, which is why Wyoming's approach must be bipartisan, durable, and measured by achievable actions and goals, not tied to any one administration or political movement. Later in this presentation, we will share success stories from across the state, and in every case, you will see the same thread. Leaders who committed to a long-term strategy, knowing the results might extend well beyond their time in office, but would ultimately build the communities they served. Economic growth, whether it is from business growing from a startup or existing business in your town, or as a company looking to relocate, relies heavily on the following three things: consistency, clarity, and certainty. For Wyoming, any strategy must reflect Wyoming realities, rural distances, high infrastructure costs, workforce constraints, and an economy rooted in minerals, agriculture, and tourism. In short, economic development is not the ribbon cutting. It's everything that happened in advance.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, we firmly believe you get there through the building blocks of economic development. And if there's one takeaway from today, it is all of this. All these pieces have to be in place for a viable economic development system to work. You cannot have the top of this pyramid without the base. And the things in the middle, workforce, infrastructure, and quality of life, do not always equate to an immediate return on investment. That is why aligning expectation within leadership around a shared vision is imperative from the start. Starting with the foundation, it starts local. Every community in Wyoming is different, and a win in Gillette does not look the same as a win in Lander or Thermopolis. That is why we are working right now through our regional meetings to understand what a win looks like in all 23 counties, 99 municipalities across the state, so we can align strategy with the real expectations of the communities doing the work. The regulatory environment matters. The policies we put in place either create certainty or create confusion. Vision and expectations matter. Leadership has to understand what we are building toward and be willing to stay the course. Workforce is critical. We are making young people in Wyoming. We are just not keeping them. If we are not addressing why our youth are leaving and what it takes to bring them back or to keep them here, we are undermining every other investment we make. The middle layer, what communities need to compete. You cannot win at the top of this pyramid without serving your current businesses, encouraging entrepreneurship, or recruiting new businesses, which I want to highlight is the last thing that you do, not the first, if you do not get that middle layer in place, or at least a plan to get it there. Without there, you're nowhere. This is the strategy, and these pieces do not always look like a traditional win, but they are solving for readiness. Infrastructure-ready sites with water, sewer, roads, broadband, and power. Predictable permitting and regulatory clarity. Workforce and housing capacity. Local government coordination, a true one-stop shop experience. Business-friendly processes and project management. Consistent programming that the public and private sector can rely on to plan. Timely access to resources and decision makers. What communities need to compete and what businesses are asking for are the same things. Certainty in the regulatory and tax environment, speed in decision making, infrastructure that is ready to go, talent to meet their needs, clear costs and timelines, a community that wants them to succeed, and connectivity to the right people and resources. When those building blocks are in place, Wyoming wins. When they are not, we lose, not because the opportunity was not there, but because we were not ready. And we have to be honest about where we are in that system and where it breaks down. Right now, we have a certainty problem. As a business brings a project, goes through the hoops, locals say yes, the business council says yes, and then the slip says no. Often in a process that feels very political. When government funding is involved, the terms are laid out when you respond to the grant. Coming back and adding new barriers after the award undermines the entire system. To be effective, the objectives and rules have to be clear and cannot change midstream. I have an example for you to study. Go Utah, a model worth studying. Utah's Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, known as Go Utah, offers a relevant example of how Western conservative state structured its economic development system for effectiveness and accountability. Go Utah is housed directly within the governor's office, giving an executive level alignment, speed in decision-making, and clear authority. It serves as a single point of coordination between state legislative goals, local governments, and private businesses, so no one is navigating the system alone. You heard from the alphabet soup how big that is. 3 things make it particularly effective. First, Go Utah partners with the Economic Development Corporation of Utah, a private sector entity that manages the business recruitment and site selection. This keeps the state coordinated while leveraging private sector speed and expertise. Second, Utah is divided into 7 economic development regions, each with a dedicated regional director who lives and works within that community. Rural towns have the same access to state resources as those that live in Salt Lake City. The strategy is locally informed and state supported, not the other way around. Third, and this is, I think, really important to us, all incentives are performance-based and transparent. Tax credits and grants are tied to the measurable job creation, wage, and investment benchmarks. Taxpayer dollars follow results, not promises. The rules are clear and they do not change midstream. So for example, they have a economic development tax increment financing framework that happens on the front end. They meet the metrics, then they receive the incentive, where it's opposite for us, where we're tied to the success of the business. This is where key distinction emerges from Utah and Wyoming's approach. Wyoming has traditionally front-loaded its economic development dollars, committing public resources up front with the hope that businesses' success follows. Utah flips that model entirely through its business incentive and tax credit structure tied to its economic development tax increment financing framework. Businesses must first meet clearly defined performance metrics before any incentive is realized. The state does not carry the risk, the business does. Wyoming would be well served to examine this distinction closely, as aligning our investment strategy to reward proven results rather than potential promises could fundamentally strengthen how we grow and retain businesses across the state. Go Utah also maintains dedicated rural development programs, administers grant funding with transparent deployment, facilitates international trade, and targets high-growth industries, all coordinated through one streamlined system. We are not suggesting Wyoming become Utah. Our mineral-dependent tax structure, vast geography, and rural scale are uniquely ours. But the principles behind their success translate directly to the challenges our communities are telling us need to be solved: executive alignment, regional presence on the ground, consistent and transparent rules, performance-based accountability, and dedicated support for our rural communities. These are not political ideas. They are structural ones, and they are worth serious consideration as Wyoming modernizes its approach. And then we're probably ready for the video on the next slide.
I have a question before you move on. One of the things I hear is that we need to fund before the project. And I think you were saying that what Utah does is after the project is proven up. Are you sure that we want to change what we do?
Mr. Chairman, we'll talk a little bit further too, that this might look a little hybrid for us. So I would suggest that we fund the infrastructure for a project that stays in the community, no matter if that business succeeds or fails. And I know that we're considering this consensus block grant model funding that we're going to talk about here in a second, and then talk about at Joint Appropriations Committee. I think that's uniquely ours. But what I think, as far as when we're attracting the business in, if we're going to look at incentivizing through either a tax increment financing program or some sort of tax rebate program, that the metrics have to be met, and then they come in infrastructure ready, and then they build their building, they work on all those things, and then if they meet those goals, then they get the reward on the end.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following up on that, Ms. Harpstra, there's a number of other states that have that same philosophy of let's, rather than funding up front, they provide tax incentives on property tax or some other means. So it's more of a, I guess it's more once they come, then we will incentivize them rather than trying to lure them in with the cornfield already built. So as you look at other states, I like that idea that you look at what's working in other states, and let's maybe change our approach. So we fund some programs that maybe benefit those businesses that want to relocate, or benefit those businesses that are already here and want to stay. Because we talk a lot about, our trying to attract new businesses, but in the meantime, we're losing businesses. We need to protect what we have first before we go out and find some others. So I'd like to delve in a little bit more of what other states are doing to incentivize businesses to relocate. And I like this idea of not funding up front, but let's reward them for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you don't mind, we'll go ahead and queue up. Our next slide is going to be about local efforts and success stories, and we wanted to take 5 minutes to highlight, we think, our gold star example, which is Cheyenne Leads. And so that would be the YouTube video.
"40 years ago, we were at ground zero when it comes to any economic development strategies or efforts. So it was an uphill climb, certainly, but we had good support from the community. Our economy was pretty sluggish, and we didn't have a great diversity of employment in the community. And it became apparent that we needed to create a bigger job base, keep our young people in the community, build our family life, and all. So that was the real key to what we were trying to do. We decided we'd carve out one tract of land and have it ready to go. And we had a prospect stop in, and they were referred to the Leeds office. And there were a couple out of Nevada who were wanting to relocate. And after a very short conversation, I had them out on that tract of land and said, "From what I hear from you, I think this is going to work for you." And probably before that evening was out, we had the basic deal made. We got that new facility in there, construction activity going on. Other people were willing to look at us then. That was a real sales point.
When you enjoy success,
it's easier to have the next success. I had the advantage of being hired by Jack and his board, and working with Jack for 2 years before he retired. That was hugely important because it was a way of him passing along the history of Leeds and the lessons that they'd learned. Because frankly, they were inventing out of whole cloth. The community and the organization was learning about economic development really from the ground up. And I inherited a lot of what they'd learned and could build on that.
I came in April of 2020, not necessarily a good time to start a new job. I didn't see my staff for 6 weeks in person. I didn't have an in-person board meeting for a full year. But really what that gave me an opportunity to do was look back over the 35-year history of Leeds and understand, how did these people get this done? You know, how were they able to build the Cheyenne Business Parkway Business Park? How did they land Sierra, EchoStar, Lowe's? How did they get another business park built? And really begin to understand, how did Microsoft come here? How did NCARD come here? What was this all about? And it really was about people coming together, grassroots initiative, passion, dream, desire, vision. We're going to get this done. You don't see that in a lot of communities across the United States, where people, they say they're going to do something, they plan to do something. You know what? They took the action and they raised the money to do it. And so that is a real testament to Cheyenne and Laramie County, Wyoming, and that grit and the backbone of these people. And so where I look at now is, how do we take the richness of the 40 years, this great history that we have, this commitment, this character and integrity, what do we do now with the resources that we have today, and how do we continue that for the next 40 years? And so that's why it is so important that we celebrate the past, but we really create a path forward for the future, for the next generations of Cheyenne residents, for the next generations of Wyomingites.
What I see in the community now is just beyond belief. It's an absolute textbook example of what needs to happen in a community and how it needs to progress. I'm extraordinarily proud of Leeds and what it's done. I'm proud of not screwing up what Jack and his board and the community had started, and handing over an organization and a history and a tradition that could be built on and that could surpass anything that we did.
I have to make sure that what Jack and Randy and the board leadership from the last 40 years have done is something I can be proud of in 40 years, to say I was a part of, to give the best quality of life to those next generations of folks in our community.
Mr. Chairman, stories like Cheyenne start 40 years ago. And I think most importantly, it's economic development is not a sprint. It's not a race with a quick finish line, or even a finish line you can always see. It's a marathon. And it starts with a local vision and action being taken. I'd like to kind of walk through one of the things that we have taken on since the session was to sit in with the communities, the counties, and the local EDOs and really find out what's working. And in that, we found that in strategic partners, there are 3 that stand out that are getting used no matter what size of community it is. That's the Wyoming Small Business Development Center, the Wyoming Women's Business Center, and Manufacturing Works. The feedback has been that each of these entities are meeting the needs of the businesses where they are at, and with challenges and facing the challenges together that they're currently facing. Other partners we've heard is the Wyoming Smart Capital Network, SBA, and the Wyoming Capital Access are all programs that have come up in every one of the regional meetings that we've done so far. Some other programs that exist outside the WBC framework that have gotten feedback for being effective for economic growth are the Wyoming Office of Tourism. And I can tell you as a local economic developer that at both the Wyoming office and at the local office, that has to be a very tight partnership, whether that's somebody coming in, and I can't even tell you the number of times that we've had somebody come into tourism and, they were just visiting Laramie and they said, oh, I think I could live here. And something's come of that. So that's an important and not to be overlooked interaction. The University of Wyoming, through various programs, colleges, schools, including the School of Energy Resources, from everything from research and development, which we have a company, Rave Aerospace, that has 2 or 3 different programs in research going with the university, and we count on them for the workforce as well. And the School of Energy Resources, I think, has a long reach all across the state. The community colleges can't be overlooked in this, and supporting in real-time local workforce needs and trainings. One that I've been lucky enough to be a small part of, but deserves to be recognized independently, is the business studio at LCCC and the work that they're doing with emerging entrepreneurs. And the MBA venture programs are examples of programs stepping in to meet people, really come to meet the communities and their vision where they're at. It's important to call out that effective programs that have been mentioned have one consistent theme. They're the ones that meet communities, companies, and businesses, no matter what their size, where they're at. We've gotten feedback that programs being accessed and utilized with great effectiveness in the current Business Council offerings include the Venture Fund, trade show dollars, entrepreneurial support. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback that meeting facilitation assisted by regional directors has been beneficial. We took advantage of it in Laramie with a housing group that's now resulted in our organization having a land trust. But I think the key thing to that is we had to ask, it had to be locally driven. And then they have to leave it in a place where the community can pick up and run and has the capacity to deliver on kind of the identified elements. In every system, it's also important to identify and acknowledge some of the programs and sources of funding that are being utilized and working outside of the Business Council. And that's USDA grants and programs, coal community grants, EDA grants and programs. Philanthropic seems to be a big tie. If a community or region has a philanthropic organization that will kind of kickstart some initiatives, which is another thing in how our housing came to be with the L. Bogan Foundation, then local EDO grants and the Wyoming Energy Authority and their energy matching funds. Also, one that gets overlooked a lot is Go Goshen, through their 1/4 cent economic development tax, has created an internal progress program and infrastructure program, which Ashley was instrumental in getting kicked off the ground years ago. From a Laramie perspective, I think a lot of other communities, and I think that a lot of other communities, when the programs are consistent and administered in a consistent fashion, they are tools that meet need. In Laramie, we've utilized the BRC to attract, retain, grow, and house companies in defense, firearms, farming, technology, childcare, and mining. Additionally, we have invested and reinvested through both properties and internal finances to attract and grow companies in the food space, chemistry, and technical education. When the tools and funds are available and consistently applied, communities have the ability to create local capacity and continually reinvest. When the systems change or aren't applied consistently or doesn't operate with certainty of process, it is a distinct detriment to local capacity building. If you apply to utilize a program, particularly when working with a private partner, you need to be able to have a definitive and attainable investment contributions from community and industry level, and have consistent application of rules and have certainty of when the bar is met, you will get to the finish line. As has been stated in this presentation, building local capacity is a long-term strategy that takes consistency over time and all facets to come to fruition. So fundamental changes to programming, dollar availability, and returns must be contemplated and communicated with a long-term lens. Changes that increase upfront requirements by communities may not be able to be met, particularly in our smaller communities. Inconsistent application of the rules and programs just muddies the water, and a lack of certainty at any point in the approval process chases away the private investment that we endeavor to attract. In one recent application, Laramie was faced with an audit that, to my knowledge, we are the only applying entity to ever have faced. We were given conflicting information on the loan that was requested and implemented, counting towards local match. In spite of the fact that we were 100% responsible for the repayment, we were told that it was going to be a different amount, and then it was clarified by a business council staff member in the hearing. And at the end of the process, which was prior to the new rules that were currently being adopted, just lost my spot. Dyslexia at its best. And at the end of the process, which was prior to the new rules being adopted, we'll administer this grant for over 10 years, but the entire payback scheme for us to build local capacity had changed in the middle under unadopted rules. That isn't to say we're not thankful for the grant and to help the community's business grow. We're thankful for the grant and loan combo that helps an important local partner continue to grow. And it doesn't say that we aren't happy to work to keep our economy growing. It's to highlight that in order to access programs and partner with private enterprises, we need a system that provides certainty and is not cumbersome, that is consistently applied, and under the rules, the process is initiated, and that there's clarity on how the state will reinvest the dollars that it recaptures, whether that comes to the local level or whether the funds will revert back to the state. I think it's important to have clarity both for the business that's investing in our state and for the community to understand if those dollars are going to come back around to be reused again. Now, I'm proud to report, and I'd be remiss if I didn't relay the results of this audit, which was not in the rules at the time, I will reinforce again, and took my staff and the city of Laramie over 3 months to complete. But when we reported the process of the audit, that I'm not opposed to communities going through as long as every community goes through them, is that when we work together through the system and are diligent with strategy, as Laramie has continued to be for the last 20 to 25 years, local capacity for economic growth does happen. For every dollar that has been recaptured locally in Laramie, roughly $3 have been reinvested for future growth. That includes a gluten-free and allergen-free food company. It includes startups that come out of the university that the university's system can no longer support in terms of hoods and different research space and shipping and chemical processes. We've been able to reinvest our dollars to house those companies in the next phase of growth, never going back to the Business Council for such. Local leadership can flourish. Local capacity can be built, and economic growth can happen when there's consistent tools, when there's clarity, and there is certainty in the process.
Next slide, please. Mr. Chairman, we are obviously not bullish when it comes to why strengthening Wyoming's economy starts at the ground level. It has to reflect the realities on the ground, and those realities are different in every corner of the state. The map before you is the...
And this bridge too has been converted into automobile traffic.
This is the bridge slide. It's really nice.
We didn't have any more audio, but it basically, the next slide that is before you is the regional map that WAM uses and has used for decades of dividing our areas into certain regions. It's not a one-size-fits-all challenge, but what a win looks like in Kemmer is not the same of what it looks like in Afton. That is in the same county. Lincoln County is a perfect example. The southern part of the county is navigating the opportunities around nuclear energy development, while the northern communities are far more aligned economically and geographically with the Northwest region, Alpine, Jackson, and Star Valley. A regional approach that recognizes these differences is not just preferred, it's going to be necessary moving forward. And our three organizations, we are already doing this work. We are jointly coordinating our efforts to build this alignment from the local level up. WEDA and WAM are in the midst of listening sessions with our members. We hold regional meetings 4 times a year and are primed and ready to deeply connect with communities to ensure alignment between local priorities and state strategy. WCCA, with representation from each county and a network built to communicate quickly and effectively, will convene a session on May 15th with the Wyoming Business Council to facilitate a candid, solutions-oriented dialogue on state and local alignment. That discussion will focus on county experiences, infrastructure and community vitality needs, including the role of Business Ready Communities program, and opportunities to better structure funding and support statewide. The outcomes of that engagement will be used to refine practical recommendations to inform the legislature during the upcoming interim review. Consensus block grant funding is one concept that could help drive this regional ground-up approach, giving communities the flexibility to address their specific needs within a framework of accountability and shared goals. What we are hearing through our regional meetings, surveys, and constant one-on-one communication with communities across the state, several themes have emerged consistently. Housing and water are the #1 issue in nearly every community. These are foundational. Without them, no other economic development strategy can succeed. Infrastructure funding has to get realistic. As one member put it, quote, Wyoming might be able to get 100% new infrastructure in the ground, sewer, water, streets across the state, but that is only one part of the equation. Maintenance and operation costs do not always pencil out through those reasonable rates. Lander is a clear example. They have $47 million available for right now against $109 million in high priority infrastructure needs of projects that are designed and ready to go in today's dollar, with only 7,500 municipal people to pay for it within those boundaries. That math does not work out with a realistic partnership, without a realistic partnership between state and locals. Smaller and unorganized communities feel underserved. I've heard that from several of the members today. Survey responses indicate that the value of state-level support has been minimal for these communities, and there's a real need for capacity building and technical assistance. Without organized local EDOs or chambers, a public-private model, municipal county staff EDOs, many have noted that partner organizations like the Wyoming Women's Business Center, SBDC, and Manufacturing Works have provided more direct on-the-ground support to entrepreneurs through advising, education, and technical assistance for early stage and underserved business owners. That kind of hands-on support is what works and what we need more of, not less. There's a disconnect in the current system. Communities are experiencing changing rules, inconsistent match requirements, and a process that feels centralized rather than coordinated. What they're asking for is straightforward, less centralization, and more coordination around existing partners rather than in growing internal headcount. They want transparent capital deployment, accountability, and cross-agency alignment. Long-term commitment matters. Evanston has been working with the Roundhouse Project for over 40 years. That kind of persistence should be met with a system that supports community through the long arc of development, not one that resets priorities with every election cycle. Our path forward. We are not here to point fingers. We are here because all three organizations believe that when the state and local partners are aligned with clear expectations, transparent processes, and shared commitment to Wyoming communities, we can build an economic development system that is durable, accountable, and effective for every corner of this state. And we are rounding the end, we promise.
This is the big finish. We do appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this discussion, as we are the on the boots in dealing with the local economic development situation, whether that be at a municipal level, a county level, or an EDO level. Our perspective from communities across the state is straightforward. Wyoming needs an economic development system that's strategic, adequately funded, structurally efficient, and accountable. These 4 pillars, strategy, funding, structure, and accountability, should guide this discussion and the framework for which economic development takes place in Wyoming. First, strategy, build from the ground up. Economic development should begin with a clear strategy rooted in local and regional realities. Wyoming is not a one-size-fits-all state. What works in Sheridan may not work in Rock Springs. What Laramie needs may differ from Torrington or Gillette. That means we need a stronger framework for regionally and locally driven economic development strategies that identify existing infrastructure strengths, workforce needs, infrastructure gaps, housing constraints, business expansion opportunities, target sectors for growth, and communities know their needs best. The state should support locally informed strategies, not impose top-down priorities. When strategy starts locally with a process called a SEDS, investments become smarter, more competitive, and more sustainable. Second, funding, invest in the foundations of growth. No strategy succeeds without capital tools that actually meet today's needs with today's dollars, that go to work today. Its longer delays create higher costs, and that means that politics have a cost. Across Wyoming, communities consistently identify one issue above all others: infrastructure funding. Economic development requires water, sewer, roads, broadband, industrial sites, housing readiness. Many communities are struggling just to maintain the aging system that exists, let alone to expand capacity. We should evaluate reforms that include increased infrastructure investment statewide, funding for replacement as well as expansion, grants in addition to loans, more flexible matching requirements, site readiness, long-term sustainability planning, and we should also continue to sharpen tools like consensus block grants. If we had a strategy built on the current system, we would be set up for success in 5 to 10 years, whereas the structure keeps changing and delaying implementation and results. We need a structure that's leaner, faster, and more responsive. Wyoming needs a statewide, I don't want anybody to hear me say that we don't need a statewide economic development entity. But there's been no debate on that need. The function is what's debated. It helps communities access resources, coordinate opportunities, deploy capital and complete projects. But we should be asking, is the system responsive? Are decisions timely? Is the process predictable? Are communities supported effectively? And is the bureaucracy minimalized? The goal should be a leaner structure with clearer roles. I always like to say, what does a win exactly look like in your community?
So tax structure must remain central at any discussion of economic development strategy in Wyoming. Our economy is driven by the three cornerstone industries: minerals, tourism, and agriculture. And any modernized framework should begin by asking how the state can better roll out the welcome mat and vertically align with local efforts already underway in those sectors. Minerals in particular remain foundational to how Wyoming funds government services and community investments. Even communities without direct mineral production benefit through severance tax distributions and the broader revenue system those industries support. For that reason, minerals must remain a top strategic priority, and alignment with Wyoming Energy Authority has got to be number one. While diversification is both important and necessary, it should not come at the expense of the industries that currently sustain Wyoming. Instead, we should focus on building them from our strengths, supporting and modernizing our core sectors while strategically expanding into complementary opportunities. Diversification and core industry support are not competing ideas. Wyoming can and should do both. Minerals must be a part of that long-term strategy.
Lastly, we need accountability with clear expectation and measurable results. Any modern system, particularly one rooted in government, must be accountable to the taxpayers, communities, applicants, and legislators. That means more than just financial reporting. It means transparency around performance and decision-making. We need clarity on what the tools are and who they are available to, who qualifies, how projects are evaluated, what timelines the applicants can expect, which is particularly important in recruiting a business, where the dollars are distributed, what outcomes are achieved, and how success is measured. Back to the question we're asking every community: what does a win look like? Think about the building blocks and how sometimes the ultimate win is not immediate. It also means being honest that not every project will succeed. I've had a dog. Normalize losses, but success for every community has investment. Businesses come and go, but the resources remain. It's still a win. Economic development will always involve risk, but success should be measured through clear metrics, lessons learned, and continuous improvement. A transparent system builds trust and attracts participation.
Next slide. This is our final slide. Chairman and members of the committee, we want to close with this: a call to reimagine Wyoming economics development system. It's time to reimagine what our economic development system looks like, who the customer is. I want everybody to think about who the customer is, how we invest in Wyoming, and what we are building towards. The current system needs to prioritize infrastructure first, create an environment where businesses want to be here, then incentivize on the back end, not the other way around. This is a living system. Local strategy feeds into infrastructure funding. Infrastructure funding feeds into business readiness. Business readiness feeds into job creation, tax-based growth, and community resilience. Each piece funnels into the next. It requires long-term alignment, consistent expectations, and the discipline to measure progress with real tools and real metrics. It is a marathon, not a sprint, and sometimes there are hurdles, but you have to stay in the race. As Wyoming considers the future of economic development, we encourage reform centered on 4 principles. First, strategic planning rooted in local realities, not studies commissioned from out-of-state consultants, not framework built in a vacuum. Listen to the locals. Our communities know their assets, their challenges, and what a win looks like in their region. Start there. Second, funding that supports infrastructure and competitiveness. Housing and water are the #1 issues in nearly every community we have heard from. If we cannot get to the basics in the ground and maintain them at a cost that pencils out, nothing else matters. Consensus block grant funding that gives community flexibility with an accountable framework is one tool worth serious consideration. Third, a lean and responsive structure built for speed and service. Wyoming does not need more internal headcount. It needs a system designed around the customer, the communities and businesses we are trying to serve. That means a policy office with executive and legislative alignment coordinated with local efforts. It means grant management housed at the executive level for speed and consistency. It means a clear front door for business leads so opportunities do not fall through the cracks. It means connectivity to rural areas through regional presence and local capacity building. And it means a leveraging public-private partnerships rather than trying to do everything in-house. Models like Utah's Go Utah demonstrate that the structure works in a Western conservative state and the principles translate directly to Wyoming. Fourth, accountability through transparency and measurable outcomes. Everybody wants that. Redefine what success looks like. Not every investment has immediate ribbon cutting, but every investment should be trackable, reportable, and tied to outcomes that communities and taxpayers can see and understand. Clear rules that do not change midstream, transparent capital deployment, cross-agency alignment. This is how we will rebuild a system that earns and keeps public trust. Wyoming communities are ready to grow. They are doing the work, showing up at regional meetings, responding to surveys, building local strategies, and asking for a partner at the state level that matches their ambition. All 3 of our organizations, WHAM, WIDA, and WCCA, are jointly coordinating to make sure that local voice is heard clearly and constructively. What we are asking for is not more government, it's for a better structure, a modern accountable system that starts at the ground level, reflects Wyoming's realities, and gives our communities the tools and consistency they need to compete for the long term. Thank you for the opportunity to share these perspectives. We welcome them and our state partners to build a system of Wyoming deserves.
All right, thank you. Thank you for quickly going through that. Is there any questions? Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Enzi, I think both of you mentioned you would like to see a leaner organization structure. What would you do with the existing Wyoming Business Council to make it more lean like you envision? What kind of things would you do?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, if it's okay, I'm going to help my friend out here. I think reevaluating the statutes, which is I think where you guys kind of coalesced around of, we know that there's a problem, and I think defining what the statutes are and what's on their plate and what's realistic is a good starting point. I believe that there's a lot of things that they've outgrown and that we could see that could be housed maybe in different areas where they can focus on really core strategies. For example, grant management. There's a really awesome grant management system that's been built into the executive office. And I think maybe bifurcating some of those duties and taking the political policy piece out of that would be helpful to them. I could see them being the front door mat and being the welcome to pull those leads in, or you have a hybrid with a public-private partnership. So you can have some protected confidentiality around those leads that come through the door. I think other core functions is we've got, I don't know.
I think this is, I'm a coach.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, I'm a coach at heart, right? So what's your role in the game? And I think we have to figure out what things belong in which buckets. And I think the business council saw the need for the infrastructure and then took a leap. I'm not sure that the infrastructure advancement for housing belongs in that bucket. And so to me, that's always where you get mission creep. If I have a kid that can really defend somebody, it's not that I don't want him to take shots. It's that I want him to focus on defense first, right? You try to put your best skills into the bucket where they're best served, and then you can have better outflow. I think, and Director Durrell and I have gone around a couple times on this of, what's in your lane. And in Laramie, when people say, what do you do? I say my job is jobs. So first and foremost, it's the economy. I'm trying to make sure that we're growing jobs, protecting jobs. We just recently had a company close with 40 high-tech jobs. And we stepped into the gap to try to preserve as much of that workforce in place and get them placed with other Laramie companies as possible. So we stay in jobs first, but then things come up like housing or a power shortage. That then impacts jobs. So I'll jump a little bit more out of my lane on those issues than just saying, well, it's not jobs, so it's not, because it impacts jobs. But kind of deciding really what it is that we want our state economic development entity to focus on, I think is a spot to start.
Mr. Chairman, I got tripped up there too, because I don't think I have all the answers by any means. And I think it starts with a statutorial review and figuring out what makes sense and what doesn't. And there's places now where we have grown in different ways that might make more sense for housing parts of what the Business Council is doing, so they can stay focused to be that welcome mat, connect the dots, help with local capacity building, work a regional model that can help facilitate some of these conversations with well-organized communities that are still having gap issues to the basin that has not really anyone coalescing locally to help drive their needs. So I don't know quite yet. I think this is going to be a fun adventure to figure out what that is, but I think you guys are on the right trail of statutorily reviewing.
Follow up? Representative. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, mine's more just a comment. I appreciate the thought you guys put in your presentation. I heard so many of the things that I'm hearing from my communities in my district stated very well and kind of why they matter. And so I appreciate that, and you speaking in ways I can't even speak because you've had these more in-depth conversations and better understanding of the space. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the speakers? Other questions? No? All right. Thank you very much. I have a question. How many people want to speak public speaking? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Any
7. One online. 1 online and 7 in-house. So we're gonna break for lunch and do public comment after lunch because we don't want to cut you short on the public comment. And it looks like we're gonna have plenty of that. So let's take a break for lunch till 1:30 and then we'll start with public comment. Thank you.